one an omen. The sky suddenly stained a fiery red. A strange growl echoed throughout the city. Before anyone could understand what was happening, pieces of debris began to slowly levitate in midair. Then something appeared atop the tallest building. Right in its center was a brilliantly glowing purple core pulsing continuously just like a living heart. The space around it twisted violently. In just a few seconds, a giant vortex formed in the middle of that structure. Shattered stone platforms drifted about, connected by heavy chains that clanked noisily as the entire structure shook. It was a gate, and whatever was on the other side was preparing to pour through. A team appeared before the dungeon. They were known as the Skibidi Elite Squad, and each of them exuded an overwhelming aura of pressure. Their attire, their weapons, even the way they looked down upon the world below, all showed that they were on a completely different level. Some looked like nobles. Others resembled seasoned warriors. But the moment they appeared, one thing became crystal clear: they were the strongest. In the city's central square, a news anchor was broadcasting the event on a giant screen. The reporter announced that at 2 p.m. today, the elite team named Divine Core, hailed as one of the strongest teams in the world, had officially challenged the final SSS class dungeon, the Isle of Sighs. The crowd gathered in the square and watched in astonishment on the big screen. Many of them couldn't believe what they were hearing. The reporter went on to explain that Divine Core had already cleared 2 other SSS class abysses before this dungeon, and this final dungeon was known as the hardest in history. For 15 years, countless top-tier teams had tried to conquer it. All of them were wiped out without a single piece of armor remaining. Someone in the crowd said that in all these years, no team has ever made it to the final boss's room. Another person nodded, saying he was very curious about what's actually inside that dungeon. Meanwhile, a middle-aged man in the crowd snorted in annoyance. He said this team was just a bunch of pretentious show-offs, and if they ended up failing to clear the dungeon, he would go online and flame them relentlessly. The reporter then revealed the captain of Divine Core. The one leading the challenge was none other than the man known as humanity's strongest Yenhan Thak, our protagonist. From head to toe, Yenhan Thak wore a full 7-piece set of SSS class equipment, each piece obtained from clearing SSS class challenges. In a way, they were like medals of honor. Only those who survived those impossible battles were worthy of wearing them. Yenhan Thak stood calmly at the head of the team. He looked rugged, confident, and possessed an unbelievable handsomeness. And most importantly, he radiated an overwhelming power. This year, Yenhan Thak had just turned 32. The world he lived in was a place filled with danger, challenges, and opportunities. The same year he was born, strange space-time gates suddenly appeared all over the world. At first, people didn't pay them much mind, but as time went on, ferocious beasts began to pour out from these gates and attack humanity. People fought back, and in those battles, they discovered something important: killing these monsters could drop equipment, and it could make humans stronger. This discovery changed everything. Since then, humanity has continued to fight the beasts and defend its territory. But in this world, money isn't everything. The most important thing is potential. The ranks of equipment and weapons are divided from low to high, FEDCBA, and the highest tiers are SSS and SSS. However, whether one can use high-level equipment depends entirely on a person's potential. Potential cannot be changed or influenced by anything. If someone's potential is only E-class, then even if they are filthy rich, it's useless. They would never be able to equip anything above E-class in their entire life. But if a person possesses S-class potential or higher, even if born into poverty, countless organizations and academies would compete to recruit and train them into elite warriors. As for Yenhan Thak, when he was just 5 years old, he was tested and found to have SSS class potential. A true genius. People were astonished to learn he was so young, and from that moment on, Yenhan Thak began a life that many would call a cheat. At age 8, he cleared an E-class dungeon, becoming the youngest person in history to do so. At 54, he cleared a C-class dungeon. At 58, he single-handedly cleared a B-class dungeon. At the age of 25, he led the first human team in history to conquer an S-class dungeon, perhaps because he was born in the same year the monsters first appeared. Over time, people began to call him by another name, the chosen one to drive away the beasts. Many believed that one day, Yenhan Thak would lead humanity to wipe out the monsters and restore peace to the world. Back in the present, the vortex in the sky continued to churn violently. Yenhan Thak looked at his team and gave the order to prepare. They were about to enter the dungeon. His teammates responded with confidence as if they had been ready for this moment their entire lives. Yen Han Thak then drew a special card. With a single motion, he activated it. The chains surrounding the dungeon began to break one by one. When the last chain shattered, Divine Core advanced together into this S-class dungeon. The abyss of size was the last abyss they had yet to challenge. Yen Han Thak was filled with confidence that they would clear it, but little did he know. This mission would change his life forever. Inside the dungeon, the space was dark and incredibly eerie. The air felt heavy and cold. Enemies were already lurking in the shadows, lying in wait for this perfect moment to strike, but what they didn't realize was the team had spotted them long ago. The monsters suddenly lunged, but the core party members reacted in an instant, effortlessly dodging their attacks. A flash of steel weapons came crashing down. The monsters were cut down one after another. Countless enemies surrounded them, and among them was a giant monster. The team immediately focused on it. The monster was just as hideous as its kin, but massively larger and far more dangerous. However, the team didn't panic at all. One team member released a snake. It shot forward like a flash of lightning, coiled tightly around the giant monster's leg, and sank its fangs into it. The giant monster froze. A notification appeared. Target has been afflicted with high-grade deadly poison. The toxins took effect immediately, causing parts of its body to completely lose all mobility. The giant monster suddenly dropped to one knee. Another member drew a flaming bow, charging his attack. 2 arrows shot out with lightning speed, and both plunged straight into the monster's eyes. The giant beast roared in agony as the arrows pierced deep inside. Just then, another team member stepped forward. He had fiery red hair and carried a weapon that looked like a massive heavy axe. Without any hesitation, he walked right up and stood directly in front of the giant monster. He didn't show the slightest bit of fear. He stared right at the hideous creature. He even uttered a taunt as if it were just another ordinary enemy he was about to defeat. He quickly realized something. The giant monster's HP had dropped below 20%. His Reaper class's passive skill had activated. This skill increased his damage by 30%. Without another moment's delay, the red-haired warrior leaped into the air, raising the colossal weapon high above his head. He brought it down with all his might, aiming straight for the giant monster's head. A whoosh cut through the air. With just one smooth swing, the axe blade sliced clean through the monster's neck. The blade moved so fast that for a moment it seemed like nothing had happened. Then, the monster's enormous head slowly slid off and crashed to the ground with a heavy thud. The red-haired man casually slung the axe over his shoulder and flashed a smug grin. The victory seemed too easy, and he looked very pleased with his clean cut. But he never expected the giant's eyes to suddenly glow crimson. Although the head was on the ground, those blazing red eyes shot wide open again. The red-haired man immediately sensed something move. Then the monster's headless corpse began to twitch. The body slowly started to move again, its muscles tensing, its fingers curling. And the massive body contorted grotesquely as if it were still alive. Seeing the headless giant moving like that sent a chill down the red-haired man's spine. The sight was horrifying enough to freeze anyone in their tracks, but fear couldn't stop him. He charged forward again and swung his axe with even greater force. The heavy blade carved a wide arc through the monster's torso. The slash split the giant cleanly in two, the cut incredibly sharp. Blood gushed out, splattering everywhere, staining the ground and littering the battlefield. Even the giant's severed head seemed to react. Its blazing red eyes widened as if it could still feel the pain despite being detached from the body. The red-haired man didn't slow down. He continued his assault, repeatedly hacking at the corpse with his axe, to make sure the monster would never move again. Han Sok reminded his teammates that this was an SSS rank dungeon, and they shouldn't judge the enemy by normal logic. He warned everyone to stay highly focused and keep a clear head. The red-haired man quickly agreed. The team continued to explore the dungeon, but it wasn't long before they were ambushed again. The entire team halted. This time, more giants appeared, their heavy footsteps shaking the ground as they approached from all directions. As the enemies slowly surrounded them, Han Sok began to analyze the situation. It seemed the monsters in this dungeon relied on overwhelming numbers rather than individual strength. Perhaps this was a swarm-type dungeon. In any case, no elite team had ever challenged this place and made it out alive. That was why all information about this dungeon was still classified. There was almost no reliable intel on what awaited them inside. Han Sok quickly turned to Samo. He ordered her to slow the enemy's movement and contain them in one area. Samo, who looked like a quiet nun, immediately obeyed. She gently closed her eyes and clasped her hands together as if in prayer. Her calm expression made her look gentle and harmless. She prayed to the Holy Mother, asking for mercy so she could guide them back home, but suddenly, the demure nun revealed something completely unexpected. Hidden beneath her skirt were countless guns. She pulled them out one by one without hesitation. She was no ordinary nun. Clearly, she was a deadly woman, and the place she intended to guide the enemies back to was hell. Muzzles flashed as she continuously fired a wide array of weapons. She looked like a maniac as she relentlessly fired from side to side, unleashing a hail of bullets that swept across the battlefield. The rounds tore through one enemy after another. At the same time, a charm effect was activated. Allure increased by 10 points. The smaller monsters suddenly changed their targets. Instead of attacking the team, they began to turn on the giants under the charm effect. The small creatures charged straight at the giants. They scrambled up their legs, climbed over their massive bodies, and frantically attacked their heads. Another team member stepped up sword in hand. He activated his rainbow skill. It was none other than Han Sok. The ground cracked open and several large boulders floated into the air as if gravity had suddenly vanished. Then he used his lotus technique with swift and precise strikes. His sword sliced the floating boulders into dozens of smaller pieces. The slashes were incredibly sharp and powerful. The shattered rock fragments shot through the air like deadly projectiles, embedding themselves in the enemies. The force of his sword slashes was so powerful that even the monsters standing nearby were torn apart by the shockwaves. Some enemies were cut down by the blade itself, while others were crushed or impaled by the flying rocks. Just like Yihan Seok's saying, "A merciful killing means ending the enemy instantly, so they suffer less." But the red-haired guy immediately started teasing him, pointing out that Yihan Seok had already smashed the enemy into tiny pieces, and still had the nerve to say something like that. Our protagonist simply ordered the team to clear the area. Soon, the battlefield fell silent. The ground littered with the corpses of the vanquished enemies. Blood and body parts were scattered everywhere. After confirming the area was secure, the team continued deeper into the dungeon, finally arriving before a massive gate. The gate was immense, its surface carved with countless grotesque faces, and large stone guardians stood on either side as if silently protecting the entrance. Yihan Seok told the team that what they were about to face was most likely the boss. This gate was probably the entrance to the boss room. No one had ever made it this far before. In the dungeon, he ordered everyone to use the necessary buffs and max out their stats. After that, he asked Leanthak to give him the SS rank Berserk Potion, the SSS rank Power Capsule, and 2 mental focus pills. Leanthak immediately understood and handed them all to their captain. Our protagonist knew that the effects of these items would only last for about a minute and a half, or maybe even less. Because of that, this battle needed to be finished quickly. A prolonged fight would be extremely dangerous. The red-haired guy also gave the captain another potion. It was a newly crafted enhancement drug. It could increase the effectiveness of all buffs by an additional 20%. Yihan Seok downed every single potion one after another. Then he said that whether they succeeded or not, it would all be decided in the next few minutes. Once preparations were complete, he immediately threw open the gate. The space behind it was vast, filled with enormous stone statues. They stood guard in the room, but strangely unlike other dungeons, there were no obvious signs of danger. As soon as they got there, Yihan Seok stepped in first, but the rest of the team stayed behind, just staring at him. They didn't move at all. He noticed this immediately, and wondered why no one was following him. Then suddenly he felt something was wrong. His body went weak. He collapsed to his knees and coughed up blood clearly from the potions he had just drunk. His mind went blank, confused, as he tried to understand what was happening. He looked down at his hands and discovered something strange. His clothes were becoming baggy. The sleeves slid down, covering his hands completely. Everything he was wearing suddenly felt oversized. Yihan Seok couldn't believe his eyes. He could clearly feel it happening. His body was shrinking. The main cause was a paralyzing poison. It had reduced his bodily functions by 90%. A warning message appeared before him. He was about to enter a state of shock. Yihan Seok fell to his knees, panic gripping his mind as he tried to figure out what was going on. What the hell is happening to me? Then a series of other warnings appeared one after another. The system announced that the user's level was insufficient, and the equipment he was using would be forcibly unequipped. One by one, all the powerful items he had earned over years of fighting suddenly fell from his body weapons, accessories, everything, all the equipment. that symbolized his victories vanished in a matter of seconds. Despite the bizarre things happening to his body, Yi Han-seok still tried to warn his teammates. He told them that something was wrong in the boss room, but his teammates didn't look worried at all. In fact, they looked completely nonchalant, as if they had expected this to happen. Samo stepped forward and stopped right in front of Yi Han-seok. She looked down at him and smirked, then nonchalantly said that the potion had taken effect. That's when it hit him. It was them. They had planned this from the very beginning. Yi Han-seok couldn't believe it. His own teammates had betrayed him. All of them just stood there, looking down on him and admiring what they had done. The red-haired guy then spoke up. He confirmed that what Yi Han-seok had just drunk wasn't an enhancement potion. It was actually a shrinking potion. Samo burst out laughing and mocked him again, saying that he still looked handsome, even as a child. The red-haired guy continued to explain their plan. He said the reason for all this was simple. Their captain was just too strong. Even if all 6 of them teamed up against Yi Han-seok while he was wearing his full set of SSS rank gear, it would be hard to tell who would come out on top. So they came up with another plan. If they made him younger, his body wouldn't meet the physical requirements to use SSS rank equipment, and once that happened, all of his gear would be automatically unequipped. One by one, they started picking up the items that had fallen to the ground, the powerful SSS rank equipment that once belonged to Yi Han-seok. Now it was being stolen by his own comrades. Samo snatched an item and laughed mockingly. She said she was the only one on the team who didn't own an SSS rank item yet, so she decided to take the necklace. Another teammate picked up Yi Han-seok's belt. He had been coveting that belt for a very long time. With it, the duration of his ultimate skill could be doubled. The red-haired guy gleefully picked up the Eye of the Star Frame. This item increased damage by 50% against enemies with low health. With this piece of equipment, he boasted that he would become a god as he swept across the battlefield. The others also scrambled to grab the items they wanted, each one choosing what suited them best. Meanwhile, Yi Han-seok was still kneeling on the ground. He still couldn't understand why. Why would they betray him like this? Why would they betray their own captain? The red-haired guy squatted down to Yi Han-seok's level. He smirked and said that he was originally going to explain everything, but Yen-hai had told him to keep his mouth shut, so there was nothing he could do. Yi Han-seok slowly turned his head to look at Yen-hai. He asked, was it him? Was he the one who planned all of this? And why Yen-hai looked down at the sword in his hand and calmly replied that for a man about to die, he didn't need to explain anything. His gaze was as cold as ever. After saying that, the whole team turned their backs and walked straight toward the gate. They didn't even bother to look back. They left Yen-han-thak behind alone and stunned. Desperate and helpless, he collapsed onto the cold ground, barely able to move. Before the gate closed, one of them casually left him with a single sentence. See you in the next life. After they left, Yen-han-thak struggled to get up. 3 years, 5 years, 8 years. All those years of loyalty ended in betrayal. He still couldn't believe them. How could they do something so despicable? But before he could think any further, a horde of giant monsters suddenly appeared. They were completely different from the giant monsters that he and his team had ever encountered before. These monsters looked much stronger and 1,000 times more terrifying. Just a single one of their attacks would be more than enough to kill him instantly. A monster stood menacingly right behind him. It was time. There was no way he could win. And just like that, he lost his life after everything he had achieved. After being revered as the strongest, he fell so pathetically. A notification suddenly appeared. System congratulations Yen-han-thak for completing the hidden quest. Sacrifice for justice. The quest condition was to let all teammates retreat safely. Stay behind alone in the boss room and give up all equipment before death. All conditions have been perfectly met. The notifications continued to appear. Because Yen-han-thak has fulfilled all requirements, the system will arrange for your rebirth. However, this reward can only be used once. A few moments later, Yen-han-thak slowly opened his eyes. He realized he was standing in front of a statue. It was a statue of a woman. No, it was actually a statue of an angel kneeling on the ground. Monstrous hands held her as if trying to bind her. Our protagonist was still confused. How was he still alive? He quickly looked at the system notification and read it carefully. He had never heard of this quest before. Something like this actually exists. Yen-han-thak didn't know whether to call this lucky or not. But one thing was for sure, he was extremely lucky to still be alive. Then he suddenly remembered something. He walked closer to the statue and used its surface to see his reflection. That's when he realized something. His body was still small. It hadn't returned to its original form. Another notification suddenly appeared. It explained that the rebirth arranged by the system would perfectly replicate the player's body at the moment of their last breath without any errors. In other words, his current body was exactly the same as when he fell. Everything that was happening now was completely unexpected. Those teammates of his knew nothing about this hidden quest. They hadn't planned anything related to the system. They simply wanted to betray him. The reason he had shrunk was simply because he had drunk a mysterious potion that they had secretly swapped beforehand. Since the system revived him after death, it also revived him after the potion had taken effect. This meant he was still in his small form. So even if he came back from the dead, what difference did it make? Currently, his body looked like he was only 15 or 16 years old. Remembering back then, his power at this age was only a mediocre C rank. The images of his old teammates appeared in his mind. Even though at that age, he had been the champion among his peers now, everything was meaningless. The weakest of his former teammates was now an SS rank. Defeating them was truly a pipe dream. Yen Han Thak slowly sank to the floor. He quietly thought about what to do next. After a long while, he let out a long, heavy sigh and just flopped onto the ground. For now, he decided to just accept what had happened. But then another notification appeared. It reminded him that in addition to rebirth completing the hidden quest, Sacrifice for Justice also came with another reward. The Level Limitless system. This system allows the user to equip any item regardless of their level. It is non-transferable and permanently bound to the owner. Yen Han Thak's two eyes widened in astonishment. This meant that, even though his body and level had regressed, he could still become the strongest once again. A sudden notification appeared. Infinite System. Its full name is the Limitless Equipment System. The system explained that its owner could wear any level of equipment, no longer bound by their own rank or level. Yen Han Thak carefully read each line. The more he read, the more stunned he became. The system was telling him that he could equip any weapon or item without being limited by his current level. That meant even at C rank, he could still use B rank, A rank, or even S rank weapons, perhaps even higher. For someone like him, this sounded almost impossible. After everything that had just happened after being betrayed by the team he trusted most, he found it hard to believe in anything anymore. He even pressed the system asking if this function was really guaranteed. At first, the system was completely silent. Then it replied with a strangely indifferent tone, as if it were teasing him, if you don't want this ability, he could just ignore it and forget the system even existed. But Yen Han Thak immediately replied that he was dying for it. Another notification appeared before his eyes. The system has detected that the owner's current level is C rank. As a result, it will grant the first reward, any B rank weapon. This weapon cannot be traded and is permanently bound to the owner. Now the owner will select a weapon type. Suddenly, countless weapon types appeared in front of Yen Han Thak. Each weapon floated in midair like a three-dimensional hologram. Daggers, firearms, greatswords, scythes, warhammers, and many others. Yen Han Thak looked at them carefully, pondering his choice. He didn't know what to choose. For a moment, he even wondered if he should choose a light sword like he had before. Light swords are excellent for offensive combat. They have a wide attack range and deal decent damage. But if you want something suitable for assassination or quick, takedowns, a dagger would be a more practical choice. He almost chose the dagger, but when he looked again, he felt that something was still missing. It's just too short. It doesn't feel powerful or overwhelming enough. With a wave of his hand, he dismissed that option and looked at the others. His gaze landed on the greatsword. Compared to a light sword, a greatsword's attack range might be a bit smaller. However, in terms of powerful strikes and swing speed, it's far superior. It's a weapon purely focused on overwhelming power. Without a moment's hesitation, he made his choice. Another notification appeared, Greatsword type selected. Granting weapon to the owner, B rank greatsword, annihilating steel. The system also mentioned that future quests would be assigned to the owner to obtain weapons of a higher rank in the future. A sword slowly materialized in front of Yen Han Thak. Its blade emitted a faint metallic glow as if it held both hope and destructive power at the same time. He reached out and grasped the weapon. The moment his hand touched the hilt, he instantly felt a powerful energy surging through it. This weapon was truly extraordinary. But what shocked him even more was that this system actually worked. Even though he was only a C-rank hunter, he was holding a B-rank weapon, without facing any restrictions. Normally, this would be completely impossible, but now it was happening right before his eyes. With this sword in hand, everything had changed. Although his physical condition was still far from its peak, he now had a chance. A chance to take back everything that had been stolen from him. This was his chance for revenge. Back outside the dungeon, many reporters had gathered near the vortex entrance ready to report on anything that happened inside. With their cameras ready, everyone stared intently at the dungeon's exit. Suddenly, a reporter shouted that there was movement at the exit. It seemed there was activity near the vortex, which meant the team could be coming out soon. A few moments later, the members of the God T Legion began to emerge from the dungeon one by one. The reporters immediately rushed forward to meet them, but when they saw the team's condition, they were all stunned. Everyone looked completely exhausted. Their clothes were tattered, their bodies were wrapped in fake bandages, and their faces were weary, as if they had just been through a brutal battle. The reporters quickly began asking questions. They asked whether the God T Legion had successfully conquered the Isle of Lament's dungeon. What no one expected was this entire scene was just an act. Just as Yen Hai was about to speak, reporters cut him off and immediately asked about Captain Yen Han Thak. They wondered where he was. Could it be that only the captain had run into trouble? The team continued their performance like professional actors. Yen Hai bowed his head and apologized to the public. Pretending to be filled with deep regret, he apologized for their failure. He explained that the giant statue monster was too fast and its shell was completely impenetrable. According to him, the team simply didn't have enough strength to fight against such a formidable enemy. But then he added something else. He declared that the most direct cause for the mission's failure was their very own captain. The crowd immediately reacted in disbelief. People couldn't believe what they were hearing. Yen Hai continued to blame Yen Han Thak, saying that perhaps their captain had become too overconfident in his own strength. He claimed the captain had recklessly charged forward time and time again, putting the whole team in danger. According to him, the team tried to stop their captain multiple times, but he wouldn't listen. The other team members played along, acting as if everything Yen Hai said was true. Yen Hai continued to explain that in the end, the captain went too deep into the enemy's lair and couldn't make it back out alive. This news shocked everyone listening. The red-haired guy suddenly chimed in, pretending to wipe away tears. He blamed himself, saying that if his kill threshold had been higher, he might have been able to kill a few more monsters and save the captain. What the public had no idea about was that the entire team had taken all of Yen Han Thak's equipment for themselves. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some people were confused, wondering how something like that could have happened. Others lamented that it was a tragedy caused by the captain's own stubbornness. Some even believed that the captain might have been cursed inside the dungeon, and that's why everything went so horribly wrong. Samo then chimed in as well. She acted shy and gentle, just like a humble nun. She told the public that she could understand the captain, that perhaps he just wanted to prove his strength. Maybe he wanted to show that he all by himself was the team's strongest member, but before she could finish, Yen Hai suddenly cut her off, shouting that that was enough, and that they should stop this nonsense. He put on an act, saying he didn't want to tarnish the captain's reputation any further now that he was dead. Behind him, Samo secretly turned away and made a mocking face, showing that everything she had just said was just for show. Yen Hai continued, claiming that when the captain realized he couldn't escape, he threw all of his equipment to them. In his final moments, according to Yen Hai, the captain told them to keep those items, and to continue lighting the flame of hope. Yan Shi then drew the captain's sword, the very weapon he had stolen from Yan Han Shuo. The crowd was completely convinced by this act. A few people started to criticize the captain, calling him a hypocrite for worrying about his reputation until the very end. Others said that if not for the captain's recklessness, the boss monster might have been defeated. Some even complained that the captain was too much of an attention seeker. If he craved glory that much, he should have challenged the dungeon by himself instead of dragging everyone else to their deaths. Yan Shi smiled to himself. He then declared that he would never give up. From that day on, he would carry the captain's sword and challenge the Island of Sighs once more. He vowed that he would return stronger and personally avenge their fallen captain. The crowd began to cheer wildly for the entire team. Many shouted that they believed in them and that one day they would conquer the sighing abyss. Others roared and cheered them on to lead humanity in the complete eradication of the monsters to destroy the evil beasts. The crowd cheered and roared without stopping. The Divine Rhino Legion, led by Yan Shi, turned around and smiled confidently as they received the praise. Their smiles were filled with deceit. In their hearts, it was now their time to shine. Once they were a little farther away, they casually unwrapped their fake bandages. Meanwhile, the area outside the vortex gradually quieted down again. As the crowd dispersed, one final figure finally stepped out of the dungeon. It was the young Captain Yan Han Shuo. His expression was filled with fury and indignation. He couldn't believe what he had just witnessed. He cursed them as shameless and ridiculous bastards. He never expected his former comrades would go this far, to put on such a brilliant play in front of the public. He still remembered vividly how they handed him the potion and stood there watching him drink every last drop. That memory made the flame of anger inside him burn even more fiercely. But one question still bothered him. Why? Could it all be just for his SSS rank equipment? He gritted his teeth in anger. Whatever the reason, their behavior was completely insane. Their fake faces, their smug expressions, and now they were even trying to destroy his reputation. Yan Han Shuo clenched both his fists. He silently swore to himself that one day he would tear off their masks with his own hands. And when that day comes, he will cut down every last one of them. Not a single one will be left alive. Night fell. Inside a quiet apartment, the trickling sound of water echoed through the bathroom. The tap was running, and a few bottles of hair dye were placed on the sink. Yan Han Shuo stood before the mirror. His hair was still wet, and steam from the shower filled the room. It seemed he had just finished showering. He slowly dried his hair with a towel while looking at his reflection. Luckily, in the clothes he was wearing earlier, there was still a little money left. Otherwise, he might have had to sleep on the streets tonight. After dyeing his hair black combined with his now smaller and younger body, it would be difficult for others to recognize him. Now that he had calmed down, his thoughts also began to shift slightly. Revenge was a must, but right now, there was something else that bothered him more. Why did they betray him? He stared at himself in the mirror again. Although this body now looked younger, it was still very strong and fit. The biggest change was his hair color. With black hair and a more youthful appearance, he looked like a completely different person. Even so, he still couldn't understand the betrayal. Excuses like being brainwashed or controlled by someone were completely absurd to him. So what was the real reason? Could it really be just for his SSS rank equipment? That question kept repeating in his mind, no matter how hard he tried to ignore it. It continued to bother him. Just then, the TV in the living room began to broadcast the news. The reporter announced that the Divine Might Squad, a team hailed as nearly invincible in recent years, had been defeated in the SSS rank dungeon known as the Island of Sighs. The news also reported that their captain Yan Han Shuo had fallen in battle after advancing too deep into enemy territory. Yan Han Shuo finished putting on his shirt as he listened to the news. Everything they said on TV was completely false. It was all just one big lie. Then the news changed topics. The reporter announced that the high school freshman selection tournament would be held tomorrow. The reporter even added that many years ago, Yan Han Shuo himself was one of the top contestants in the very first selection tournament. Hearing that, Yan Han Shuo froze. The high school selection tournament. Perhaps the answers he was looking for were connected to it. After all, the Divine Might Squad had worked with a few schools before, and although he now had a level unlimited system, getting revenge would still be a long journey. It would take some time. Thinking about that made him realize something else. First, he needed a new identity. Even though his body was younger, his potential should still be at the SSS rank, and the high school selection tournament cared more about potential than current strength. If he could use that to get close to some influential people, he might find some clues. His train of thought was interrupted again by the reporter's voice on the TV. Tomorrow's rookie selection tournament was about to begin, and the reporter wondered if another genius would appear this year. Yan Han Shuo stared silently at the TV. It seemed he had already planned his next move. A smirk appeared on his face. Was he really going to experience student life all over again? He walked to the window and looked outside. If he really had to live as a student once more, there was only one thing to do. He needed a new identity. That night on the streets, Yan Han Shuo, with his head covered by a hoodie, walked through the dark alleys. This place was known as a lawless area. Many rumored that all sorts of illegal activities took place here. One of those activities was forging identification cards. The place looked exactly like a scene from a crime movie. Dim lights, dilapidated buildings, and suspicious people everywhere. As Yan Han Shuo walked past, a few people stared at him, trying to figure out who he was, probably because he looked like a newcomer in this area. He finally reached his destination. He knocked on a door. A big guy with a lip ring opened it and grumbled, asking who was knocking at this hour. Yan Han Shuo calmly asked if they could make him a fake identification card. You also mentioned you had money. The man immediately noticed that Nan Sok looked very young. A wicked smile spread across the man's face. To him, too, that meant countless lucrative opportunities. Maybe this kid was running from something. Or maybe he was an orphan no one would bother looking for. As they spoke, a few other men slowly gathered around them. They silently surrounded Nan Sok, as if waiting for him to make a wrong move. It seemed like they were guarding this place. Nan Sok realized this, but he remained calm, only giving them a cold glance. A blond man holding a baseball bat burst out laughing, saying they were usually the ones kidnapping people. But now some brat had the guts to walk right into the tiger's den. Another man chimed in, joking that even though boys don't sell for as much as girls, his organs could still fetch a lot of money. Nan Sok frowned slightly. From what he had heard, this place only handled petty illegal business like fake documents. He didn't expect things like human trafficking or organ harvesting. Still, he kept his composure and tried not to show too much emotion. Then the man suddenly swung his bat. He rushed forward, taunting him to be a good boy. He even joked that they'd be giving him an anesthetic soon. But before the bat could even reach him, Nan Sok made his move. He dashed forward and launched a powerful flying kick. The kick landed hard on the blond man, sending him flying backward. Blood spurted from his mouth as he slammed into the wall. Everyone was stunned. One of them exclaimed in shock, "That skill. That has to belong to a D-rank challenger." Nan Sok let out a soft sigh. Today definitely couldn't get any worse. Nan Sok activated the unlimited leveling system. His weapon appeared instantly. The men were shocked once again. None of them saw where that weapon came from. A weapon with an effect like that had to be at least B rank or higher. How could a young kid like him have something like that? First he was betrayed by his own teammates, and now he'd run into criminals, doing such despicable things when all he wanted was a simple ID card. Nan Sok was tired of all this trouble. His light sword expanded as it fully materialized, and he casually slung it over his shoulder. A notification appeared. Item equipped successful. B-rank weapon, steel light sword. Elsewhere in the city, inside a luxurious penthouse, the traitors were hiding out. Samo carefully checked the room for hidden microphones, or traps, but she found nothing. The red-haired man sat comfortably on the sofa and asked what their next plan was. Nantik stood in front of the mirror adjusting his clothes. He said that the school's board of directors had just contacted him. They were hoping their team would participate in the high school selection tournament tomorrow. Now that everyone believed Nan Sok was dead, the school desperately needed someone to boost the public's morale. The remaining team members listened in silence. Nyuntik instructed that when the time comes, they just needed to control their expressions and let him handle the rest. The man playing with a snake suddenly spoke up, asking why Nan Tich was already dressed so nicely when the tournament was tomorrow. It was as if he was about to go somewhere special. This made him pause. Nan Tich just glanced at them and coldly said that he had a date. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a photograph was placed neatly on a table. In the photo were Nan Thak and a beautiful woman. Inside the living room, the woman was watching the news on TV. The news report endlessly repeated one story. According to the members of the Shenwei core team, Captain Nan Thak had fallen in the SS rank dungeon, S, known as the Sighing Abyss. The woman's name was Nak Lan Din Yan Han Thak's fiancé. Upon hearing the terrible news, tears silently streamed down her cheeks. She could hardly believe that the man she loved most was gone forever. Her trembling hands clutched the photo frame, her shoulders shaking uncontrollably as she tried to accept the cruel reality she had just heard. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Naklin Din froze for a moment. A tiny spark of hope flashed in her eyes. Could it be him? Is Hanthak still alive? She rushed to the door, her heart pounding with every step. She called out his name, hoping to see the man she loved standing right there. But the person who walked in wasn't Nan Thak. It was Nan Tich. Nyaklin Din's expression immediately turned to shock. She looked at him confused and asked why he had a key to her house. Nyantik calmly explained that her parents had given him the key. According to him, her parents were afraid she would be too grief-stricken after hearing the news, so they asked him to come and check on her. Nyakling Ding sighed and told him he didn't need to worry about her. She said she just wanted to be alone right now, and asked him to leave. But Nantik stood motionless, as if he hadn't heard a word she said. He suddenly stepped forward and hugged her from behind, simultaneously snatching the photo frame from her hands. He indifferently told her not to waste her time missing Han Thak anymore. In his eyes, Han Thak was never worthy of her dedicating her life to him. Nyantik continued to spin his lies, saying that during the dungeon mission, Han Thak had constantly ignored the safety of his teammates and pushed everyone to their deaths. He insisted Han Thak was just a selfish man, who only ever cared about himself. Hearing those slanderous words, bah. Nyaklin Ding was furious. She immediately snatched the photo frame back from his hand. She firmly denied it, declaring she didn't believe a single word he'd just said. In her eyes, Han Thak was never that kind of person. He would never betray his comrades or act selfishly. Han Thak was always someone who faced every challenge head-on, always pushing forward no matter how difficult the adversity. Meanwhile, in a dark alley, the rain had begun to pour down, but Han Thak stood there calmly. With his greatsword, he glanced at the men surrounding him and coldly told them to come at him all at once. He said he was in a hurry and didn't have time to take them down one by one. These words immediately enraged the thugs. One rushed forward, screaming that Han Thak would pay the price for his arrogance. Another laughed mockingly. He boasted that even if that punk had a B-rank weapon, he could still beat him to a pulp. Several men charged towards him at once, their weapons cutting through the air, closing in from all directions. Han Thak calmly watched them approach. In his mind, he sharply analyzed the situation. A light sword and a great sword were two different types of weapons, but that didn't mean the combat skills he had learned were useless. Skills were still skills, and combat experience could not be erased. Just as the enemy's weapons were about to strike, Han Thak moved. He drew his greatsword in a single swift and beautiful motion. A notification appeared. Preparing to execute maximum range sword drawing slash. Skill level B rank. The blade tore through the curtain of rain, swinging in a wide and powerful arc. The attack hit its mark in an instant. Several men were thrown backward, as if they had run into an invisible wall. Some weapons snapped in two as the sharp blade swept past them. Others were hit head-on in just a few seconds. The alley fell silent. The men who had just been charging aggressively were now lying flat on the ground, groaning in pain under the relentless rain. Han Thak still stood there calmly, his sword held firm in his hand. A defeated man managed to lift his head and whisper, asking who he really was. Han Thak calmly replied that he was just someone who didn't want to disappoint anyone. Even in the middle of a fight, his answer sounded strangely dramatic. Just then, the beefy man with the lip piercing opened the door again. He looked out, and his face went pale when he saw the thugs strewn across the ground, all taken down by one kid. Han Thak stepped forward and placed his hand on the door, preventing the man from closing it. He looked at him coldly and asked in a low voice if he was ready to make the ID card now. Back at Nyaklin Din's house, the argument between her and Nantich continued. Nyaklin Din insisted that she knew the real Han Thak better than anyone else, and above all, Nantich had no right to interfere in her life. When Nantich tried to grab her hand, she immediately smacked it away, but Nantich just smirked. He said that actually he did have that right, because her parents had already accepted his marriage proposal. He casually announced that their wedding would proceed as planned in 1 month. Nyaklin Din froze, completely stunned by the news. She couldn't understand what the hell was happening. Why did she suddenly have to marry this person? Back in the alley, the man with the lip piercing finally had to obediently and timidly hand over the fake ID card to Han Thak. Han Thak asked how much it cost, but the man hurriedly shook his head and refused to take any money. He even called Han Thak Big Brother, trying to act friendly. He claimed that the whole kidnapping thing earlier was just to scare people. It was just an act, so don't worry about it, he said. Han Thak calmly replied that he had known that for a long time. The man nervously nodded along, although it was clear he was just trembling in fear of Han Thak. Han Thak added that crimes like human trafficking weren't something that D-rank challengers would dare to commit. Even if you gave them 100 times the guts, they wouldn't dare. That meant there was definitely someone backing them from behind a much bigger boss. Hearing this, the man with the lip piercing began to break out in a cold sweat. He suddenly worried about what this strange kid would do next. Han Thak calmly said that he didn't expect a guy like him to know who the real boss was, but even so, he had to be punished as a warning. Han Thak raised his weapon and struck the man hard. The unlucky guy was sent flying, tumbling across the street. It was actually kind of funny Han Thak had already gotten the fake ID before deciding to give him a beating. The man finally collapsed on the ground outside, covered in bruises. As everything came to an end, the sky had begun to brighten. Han Thak looked up and noticed the sun slowly rising. Come to think of it, this was the first morning he had seen, since his body had become young again. He pulled out the fake ID card and looked at it closely. It displayed the name for his new identity. From this moment on, Han Thak would live under a new name, Teo Vo Tan. The morning sun wasn't shining brightly yet. Today was the day of the high school selection tournament. Students were lined up outside the stadium, forming a very long queue. Teachers and staff moved about preparing everything for the event. A few students in the line had already started wiping beads of sweat from their faces. The heat was incredibly muggy, and the line had barely moved at all. One of them started to grumble that the registration process was taking too long, and it felt like they would be stuck here forever. Another student said that Yenhan's death had really lit a fire in everyone's hearts. Because of that, there were now a lot of students who believed they could become the next Han Thak. Today's competition felt a lot more intense. A few students nearby were even more excited. One confidently declared that Han Thak had appeared in his dream last night, like he had come to cheer him on. A few others nodded seriously as if they actually believed it. Their words showed just how much the legendary hero had inspired them. What they didn't realize was that the real Han Thak in the flesh was at the event right now. Our protagonist was leisurely, sitting on a nearby stone bench. Because of the intense heat, he slowly took a sip of water from his bottle while his eyes scanned the surrounding crowd. Students constantly walked past, but without paying him any attention. Of course, how could they possibly recognize his true identity? Han Thak thought to himself that it was a smart move to register at the crack of dawn. That way he didn't have to deal with that ridiculously long line outside. However, there was another issue weighing on his mind. He barely had a single coin to his name. Even if he somehow managed to achieve SSS rank today, it's not like he would get cash or any rewards immediately. This meant his financial, dreadful situation wasn't going to get better overnight. At this rate, he was genuinely worried he might have to sleep on the streets tonight. As he sat there quietly eating his meager lunch, a group of students happened to walk by. They were chattering away, and the topic quickly shifted to Han Thak. The guy who looked like the leader of the group scoffed and called Han Thak a clown who just loves to show off. According to him, Han Thak was just trying to look cool in front of everyone. The leader kept complaining that even the news was going on, hoping another Han Thak would show up in this competition. He sarcastically said, as if the death toll isn't high enough already. His burly friend immediately chimed in. Little did they know the one and only Han Thak was sitting just a few feet away quietly eating his meal. The group kept gossiping. One of them said that Han Thak only looked strong because of his gear. If they had the exact same set of gear, they could easily destroy everything too. Another student pointed out that you still need to have the potential, an SSS rank potential, and the strength to even use that gear properly. But another guy immediately cut in, telling him not to defend someone who betrayed his own comrades. Because of the lies spread by Yenhai and his lackeys, the public now completely bought into that story. The burly student let out a loud laugh and threw in another sarcastic remark. He wondered if that naive, white-haired guy really thought he was some kind of savior. In his opinion, Han Thak was just delusional, probably had a case of main character syndrome. The whole group roared with laughter. Just then, another male student suddenly stepped forward. He was a blond kid wearing a pair of thick-rimmed glasses. And though he looked nervous, his face was filled with anger as he yelled, telling them to stop slandering Han Thak. Hearing that Han Thak slowly lifted his head, his attention now on the boy. The blond kid continued to defend him. He said that before Han Thak came along, humanity was constantly suffering crushing defeats and retreating from high-level beasts. Cities lived in constant fear. That dimensional gates could open at any moment. He said it was Han Thak's arrival that changed everything. A few other students nearby stopped to listen. The lead bully was starting to get annoyed. He pointed a finger and cursed the blond kid, calling him a little bastard. He was clearly pissed that someone had the guts to talk back to him. The bully then smirked, and his voice dripped with sarcasm. He said mockingly, "Oh, of course. Han Thak is humanity's great hero after all." He went on questioning why most of the Divine Rhino Corps' SSS rank gear ended up with Han Thak and Han Thak alone. He also demanded to know why Han Thak frequently charged into dangerous zones without a single thought for his teammates' safety. According to him, it was simply because Han Thak was arrogant enough to think he was invincible. Another student jumped in, adding that in the end, Han Thak was nothing more than a villain who leeched off his team. Someone else piped up that society should get rid of this whole lone hero mentality. Seeing how things were going, the blonde kid started to feel anxious. It seemed like he was the only one there standing up for Yen Han Thak. The crowd around them even seemed to be getting angry about the subject. The lead bully suddenly narrowed his eyes, staring at the blonde kid. "I remember you now," he said. "This kid is Ung Kai Tuan, the son of the famous SS rank hunter Ung Vo Wai." Then the bully burst into cruel laughter. He said it was a real shame for a father, so powerful to end up with a piece of F-rank trash for a son. Before Kai Tuan could even react, the bully suddenly slammed a vicious kick into him. The bully laughed, scoffed, and said he'd teach Kai Tuan a lesson and knock that hero fantasy right out of his head. The force of the kick sent Kai Tuan sprawling to the ground. Some of the students nearby even agreed, saying he deserved it for sticking his nose where it didn't belong. Han Thak watched in silence. Seeing another student get beaten so brutally made him uneasy. But at the same time, he couldn't afford to be reckless. If his identity was exposed now, it would cause a mountain of problems, especially since he was trying to keep a low profile while completely broke. Meanwhile, the bully was still running his mouth. He said he didn't give a damn who Kai Tuan's father was. Whether he was an SS rank hunter or if his family was filthy rich, none of that could change the fact that Kai Tuan himself was just a useless F rank. Kai Tuan slowly propped himself up from the ground. He admitted, "Yeah, maybe I am a piece of F-rank trash, but that doesn't give you the right to insult Yen Han Thak." With determination, Kai Tuan summoned his weapon. It turned out to be nothing more than a simple wooden staff. He gripped it tightly, ready for a fight. No matter what, he would not let them insult the hero he admired most. The lead bully let out a booming laugh and summoned his own weapon. A silver axe appeared in his hand. It was a D-rank weapon. The power gap between the two of them was glaringly obvious. This only made the bully more excited. If Kai Tuan wanted to fight with that pathetic F-rank weapon, then he'd be more than happy to smack him out of his stupid fantasy. The surrounding students gasped in shock, surprised that there was a D-rank challenger among them. Although D-rank wasn't rare among adults, reaching that level at only 15 years old was quite uncommon. The bully prepared to strike Kaijun. Just as he raised his hand, something suddenly slammed into him. He was sent flying by a powerful kick. Kaijun froze in astonishment. He knew he hadn't even touched the guy. It was Han Thak, or to be precise, Wu Jin. Kaijun stared at him in disbelief. The movement had been too fast. It was almost a blur. For some reason, the moment he saw Wu Jin, he had a strange feeling that reminded him of Yan Han Thak. Wu Jin calmly told Kaijun to get one thing straight. He didn't intervene because Kaijun came from a wealthy family. For a moment, Kaijun almost thought that the person standing before him truly was Yan Han Thak. Of course, he had no idea how close to the truth that thought was. The bully's friends rushed over to help him up. Their leader was furious. He couldn't believe someone dared to attack him. Without hesitation, he picked up his axe and threw it straight at Wu Jin. The students nearby panicked and started to back away. Wu Jin reacted instantly. He snatched Kaijun's wooden staff and kicked it forward. The wooden staff collided with the axe in midair. The wooden staff shattered instantly, but the axe's trajectory was knocked off course. At least, no one was hurt. Wu Jin calmly told Kaijun that a low-rank weapon isn't always useless against a more powerful one. Having courage is a good thing. However, Kaijun looked horrified because that wooden staff was his only weapon, and now it was completely destroyed. Wu Jin continued saying that rushing forward without thinking isn't a wise move. Then he slowly turned towards the bullies and said he had a few words for them. His calm tone alone was enough to make them feel uneasy. Wu Jin walked over and picked up the bully's axe. From the ground, he said that in this world, challengers are not superior to anyone else. Commoners and those at the bottom of society are not weak or inferior. On the contrary, he continued, they are the very foundation that supports this entire society. Our protagonist easily wielded the bully's weapon. The students who witnessed it were stunned. Wu Jin had just picked up a D-rank weapon. As if it were nothing, no way. Could there really be another D-rank challenger of the same age standing right in front of them? Some students began to wonder if this year's competition was going to be that fierce. Wu Jin continued speaking. Putting the matter of Yan Hanthak aside for a moment, he said that using the status of a high-ranked challenger to bully others was something he could not tolerate. He raised the axe and prepared to swing it at the bully, but before he could, a hand suddenly grabbed his wrist. A blue-haired man calmly told them to stop saying that responding to violence with violence is not an honorable act. Wu Jin was a little surprised that someone could actually stop him. The blue-haired man went on to explain that teaching the bully a lesson like this was enough. If they continued to fight, it would only increase the risk of retaliation later. This man was an S-rank challenger instructor, Qing Gangqi. Gangqi noticed that Wu Jin could lift a D-rank weapon with ease. That alone showed him this teenager had potential. Curious, he asked for Wu Jin's name. "My name is Yan Han." For a moment, Wu Jin almost revealed his true identity, but he quickly corrected himself and introduced himself as Xiao Wu Jin. Gangqi let go of his hand and said he would remember that name. He also added that he'd be keeping an eye on Wu Jin during the upcoming selection. Wu Jin just watched him for a moment as the instructor walked away, thinking to himself, I need to calm down before I accidentally expose myself. He thought to himself that life was truly unpredictable. He never expected to be the one breaking up a student brawl like this, between students like this. Looking around at the noisy teenagers, Gangqi sighed softly. There were too many troublesome brats gathered here today. Clearly, this was going to be an incredibly busy day for him. The potential assessment conference finally began. The atmosphere inside the giant arena grew incredibly tense, as thousands of students gathered, each one eager to prove they were different from the rest. For many of them, this was a once-in-a-lifetime moment. It was a make-or-break situation for them to find out if they were truly talented or just another mediocre challenger in the crowd. The host's voice echoed throughout the arena, informing everyone that all students had completed their registration. This year's competition for new students had broken the previous record with a total of 4,338 students participating. The crowd reacted with excitement after hearing that number. The host continued explaining that to ensure fairness, the potential assessments would be conducted in alphabetical order of the students' names. When Wu Jin heard this, he quietly grimaced. His surname Xiao starts with an X, which meant his turn would be near the end. Kaijun quickly realized the same thing about his own situation. His surname Wang starts with a W. His position in the list wasn't much better than Wu Jin's. The host then said that before the official potential assessment began, they had invited a few important guests to liven things up. Just then a man politely apologized as he passed by Wu Jin and Kaijun. The two of them stepped aside to let him pass. As Wu Jin moved back, he caught sight of a few familiar faces in the distance. The host then revealed the identity of the special guests. They were the members of the Divine Rhino Legion. The moment this elite team appeared, the students in the arena erupted in thunderous cheers. One student whispered to his friend that the Divine Rhino Legion had just suffered a devastating defeat in a dungeon recently, and yet they were still dragged here to be cheerleaders. The student couldn't help but feel it was a bit pathetic. The Divine Rhino Legion strode confidently forward. Their presence was as majestic as ever. None of them realized they had just walked past the very person they had betrayed, Yan Hanthak. Kaijun quietly remarked that the aura radiating from this legion was truly terrifying. After all, they are one of the top teams. Wu Jin's expression changed as the members of the Divine Rhino Legion stepped onto the stage, seeing those guys appear here. It made his thoughts turn cold. He couldn't help but wonder why these traitors would come to this event. Perhaps they were here for a chance to humiliate Yan Hanthak in front of everyone again. However, he quickly suppressed those thoughts as Yen He stepped forward and began to address the students. He introduced himself as the acting captain of the Divine Rhino Legion and said he was very happy to meet everyone at this event. He continued mentioning that many students had probably heard about the incident that occurred a few days ago. According to him, the Legion had suffered heavy losses, all because of a series of actions by their captain. The entire Legion stood neatly in formation behind him, lined up as if waiting for their turn to speak. It looked like nothing less than a well-staged play. Yen Hai continued speaking. He said that despite everything that had happened, he still hoped everyone could look up to Captain Yan Hanthak as an ideal role model. He explained that he didn't expect everyone to be too forgiving of the late captain, but he wanted to remind them all that in this world, no one is perfect. You can't completely condemn a person for a single mistake. Outwardly, Wu Jin remained composed, but deep inside his anger was starting to boil. Kaituan quietly remarked that Yen He's words seemed to have some kind of hidden meaning. Yen Hai continued his speech, saying that the captain wasn't the real reason they failed in the dungeon and that he wasn't some arrogant or reckless man. In his words, Yenhan Thak was a hero of humanity and a pioneer in the fight against the monstrous beasts. The speech sounded so noble, but the hypocrisy behind it was all too clear. Even so, some students in the audience began to believe Yenhai's words. One student commented that even after being dragged down by his captain, Yenhai still refused to blame him. Another student had the opposite reaction. The more Yenhai spoke like this, the more that student felt Yenhan Thak must have been a terrible person to drag such loyal comrades into danger. Yenhai was still speaking. He said that today he would be carefully observing everyone's performance in this crowd. He hoped someone with the strength to surpass their former captain would emerge so they could finally lead humanity to a complete victory over the monstrous beasts. After finishing his speech, he handed the microphone back to the host. The host then announced that the official evaluation test was now beginning. The students immediately erupted in loud cheers. Some screamed that they would definitely achieve S-rank potential. Others shouted that they wanted to be the one to surpass and crush Yenhan Thak. Before long, students began lining up in front of the potential assessment machine. All each student had to do was place their hand on the scanner and the system would instantly detect both their potential rank and their current level. Student after student stepped up. Some were found to have E-rank potential while currently being only F-rank challengers. Others had a slightly higher current level, but weaker potential. Many of them ended up stuck at the lowest levels. As more and more students completed the test, disappointment began to spread through the crowd. Kaituan noticed that nearly 100 students had been tested, and most of them fell into E-rank or F-rank. Clearly, all that loud cheering from before couldn't magically grant someone potential. Kaituan silently hoped to at least achieve D-rank. Wujin suddenly brought up something from the past, speaking nonchalantly. Back in my day, or rather a long time ago, potential could be detected when kids were only 4 years old. He wondered why people now only test for potential when they turn 15. Kaituan looked a little surprised by the statement. He replied that was a really long time ago. He explained that in this day and age, potential is extremely important. It's not just valued by society and schools, parents are just as concerned. However, children with high potential are incredibly rare. In the past, when parents discovered their child had low potential at a young age, many of them simply couldn't accept it. Some even abandoned those children. Back then, the streets were filled with abandoned infants discarded for being deemed to have low potential. To prevent that tragedy from happening again, the government finally issued a new regulation. Children are only allowed to take their first potential test when they turn 15. Wujin finally understood the reason and nodded slightly. Just then, another student stepped up to the machine. As soon as he placed his hand on the scanner, the results appeared. His potential level was identified as C rank, while his current level was E rank. Many students reacted in shock. Finally, a C rank challenger had appeared among them. The student himself looked incredibly proud. He even started to think that a few high schools would probably be competing to recruit him. However, his smug expression quickly vanished. An event official suddenly approached him and calmly asked, if he really thought he had passed the test. The student was bewildered. The official then announced that this student had violated the rules of the competition and was immediately disqualified. The student couldn't believe what he was hearing. The official explained that the student had deliberately cheated. Did you honestly think you could get away with it? In a frustrated tone, he explained that the competition had recently switched to using the newest model of testing machines. This device doesn't just detect potential and strength, it can also analyze the biological age of a challenger. According to the machine's analysis, this student isn't 15 years old. His real age is 19. This announcement sent a shockwave through the students in the arena. Although this student had C-rank potential, being only E-rank at 19 years old was actually considered quite pathetic. Kaituan was astonished that the scanner was powerful enough to detect a challenger's age. Wujin, however, suddenly felt a sense of dread. If this machine could detect age, then this was a serious problem. Theoretically, he would be scanned as 32 years old. Meanwhile, the disqualified student was escorted out of the arena and blacklisted by the high schools. Wujin thought to himself, this situation is not good at all. The core members of the Divine Rhino Legion are here too. If my identity gets exposed, things will become extremely dangerous, no matter what. You couldn't let that risk happen either. Standing there, you started thinking fast, trying to find a way to avoid being exposed. Kaituan noticed that Wotan seemed to be deep in thought. Judging by his expression, it looked like he was considering leaving. Kaituan immediately asked if he was planning to withdraw from the competition. Votan didn't answer right away. He was still thinking, trying to figure out another solution. Just then, the bullies they had run into earlier suddenly confronted them again. The leader of the bullies noticed their expressions and immediately started mocking Votan. He said it looked like they were getting ready to run and asked if they had already given up on participating. One of the proctors noticed the commotion and immediately alerted the instructor. One of the bullies jeered, asking if Votan was also lying about his age, just like that 20-year-old D-rank challenger, pretending to be a young student. Another student in the group chimed in, saying that from the start, Votan's aura didn't seem like that of a normal student. This comment annoyed Votan. Unfortunately, that bully wasn't wrong at all. Votan was indeed hiding behind a youthful appearance, but no matter how frustrated he was, he couldn't show any weakness. Kaituan was also starting to get worried. For a moment, he wondered if Votan would really end up like the student who had just been disqualified. Now that suspicion had been raised, the situation suddenly became much more dangerous. Faced with this growing suspicion, Votan had to quickly decide what to do next. Kaituan started to suspect that Votan might be just like the student who was disqualified for hiding his true age. The thought flashed through his mind because Votan had been acting very strangely, ever since the scanner showed it could analyze a person's age. Yet Votan showed no reaction at all. He couldn't let his cover be blown, so he simply turned around and continued walking, as if the accusations meant nothing. The moment he moved, the leader of the bullies immediately called him back. He shouted, asking what Votan was doing, and mocked him for trying to run away. The bully then grinned maliciously and said that attempted murder and murder carry the exact same charge and the same sin. The way he said it sounded like he was deliberately trying to provoke Votan, hoping to see him lose control. He continued to taunt him, saying that Votan shouldn't even think he could get away so easily. In the bully's eyes, that was just too naive. Votan kept walking, trying his best to ignore them. Compared to the greater troubles he was facing, this petty conflict meant nothing. His current mission was far more important than wasting time fighting with these guys. However, the surrounding students had started to join in on the taunts. A few began to make sarcastic remarks, saying loudly that situations like this were a perfect example of killing a chicken to scare the monkeys. If those planning to lie about their age saw this, they would have to think twice before trying any tricks. Another student agreed, saying that whether Votan went on stage or not, he still deserved to be punished. Another commented that pretending to be a teenage genius was truly shameless. They questioned if Votan was even worthy of the act. Another one chimed in, saying they had almost been fooled by Votan. Hearing these whispers, Kaituan grew even more confused about the person he had just met. He didn't know whether to believe these accusations or not. Just then, two staff members from the organizing committee approached Votan. They calmly requested his cooperation in registering his name and information. They explained that his actions would be handled according to the rules and the law. Votan let out a soft sigh. It certainly wasn't a sigh of relief. In his mind, it seemed there was now only one option left. The leader of the bullies sneered, saying that Votan never had a choice to begin with, but Votan maintained a calm expression. He just replied nonchalantly that he would go on stage and take the test. The surrounding students couldn't believe what they had just heard. Ignoring the accusations of age fraud, going on stage now would only bring him more humiliation if the detector exposed him. However, Votan had never admitted to faking his age. He only said he wanted to take the test. With that, he calmly walked towards the stage, followed by the organizing staff. The leader of the bullies stared after him, completely bewildered, wondering what the hell that guy was planning. Near the front of the crowd, members of the T-God Legion were also observing the assessment. They noticed the disturbance happening near the queue. One member showed curiosity, but the snake controller coldly said that it was no longer any of their business. Meanwhile, Votan had stepped onto the stage. The entire arena's attention was fixed on him. Everyone held their breath, waiting for the scanner to produce a result. Standing before the machine, Votan carefully deduced the method this scanner used to determine true age. He observed the device closely before placing his hand on it. Accurately determining a person's age is not simple at all. Yet this machine didn't collect blood, saliva, or fingerprints. Without those biological samples, accurately measuring age would be extremely difficult. That meant there were only a few possible explanations. One possibility was that the student who was caught earlier was actually an actor who had been planted. Perhaps the organizers had arranged this play to scare off those with intentions of cheating. The entire scene just now It might have been just a show staged to force students who were faking their age to withdraw on their own. As for the second possibility, Teovotan placed his hand on the scanner. The entire arena fell silent, watching. The bully kept his eyes glued on our protagonist. Even the members of the T-God Legion had to pay attention to him. After a moment, the machine displayed the result. Current true age determined to be 15 years old. Kai Tuan immediately let out a celebratory sigh of relief while the crowd erupted in mixed emotions of shock, astonishment, and disbelief. Teovotan himself was not surprised at all. In the world of challengers, there's a little-known profession called assessor. Assessors have the ability to analyze monstrous beasts and determine their level, their age, and many of their other physical conditions. The closer they are to the target, the more accurate their assessment. That scanner on the stage, Mile, is most likely just a decoy. The real assessment probably comes from one of the staff members standing nearby. Xiao Wujin was confident he wouldn't be exposed because he suddenly remembered a special kind of magic potion. This liquid medicine could temporarily lower the displayed level and age of a monstrous beast. Even assessors couldn't easily detect the true stats while the magic potion was still in effect. The poison that was once used on him was likely the same type. Thinking of this, he suddenly realized he might have found an extremely important clue today. Just then, the scanner produced another result. The students held their breath, waiting patiently. The entire arena was utterly shaken. Countless students stared blankly at the screen in complete disbelief. The machine announced that Xiao Wujin's challenger potential was SSS rank. Many couldn't believe that the person standing right in front of them possessed SSS rank potential. A few people cried out that they had almost missed the appearance of a true genius. The bully was completely stunned. He couldn't believe the person he had just picked a fight with was an SSS rank genius. In the Divine T-Core, Yan Shi also noticed the crowd's reaction. They looked towards the stage and realized an SSS rank teenager had just appeared. Sammo quietly remarked that the kid's aura strangely reminded her of Yan Hanshuo. Meanwhile, Xiao Wujin's hand was still on the scanner. The machine continued to scan, but something unusual happened. It couldn't detect his current challenger level. The operator looked confused as the screen repeatedly failed to display a result. Even Xiao Wujin felt a bit puzzled. This was most likely related to the levelless system, the unusual system he possessed. After a moment of hesitation, the operator explained that they would use a more precise device to test his current level. But for now, he loudly called for the crowd to send this genius teenager off with their most enthusiastic round of applause. The entire arena erupted in thunderous applause. After Xiao Wujin left the stage, the assessment continued. Another student stepped up and placed his hand on the scanner. His results showed a D rank potential, and his current level was E rank. Immediately after, it was the bully leader's turn. When he placed his hand on the scanner, the results revealed an A rank potential and a current level of D rank. The crowd whispered among themselves that reaching D rank at the age of 15 was already very impressive, and someone with A rank potential was definitely not to be trifled with. Another student muttered that it was just this guy's bad luck for foolishly picking a fight with someone 10,000 times stronger than him. The assessment continued as another student walked onto the stage. This time, it was a female student. While the thugs were still cheering for their boss's result, the girl calmly stepped up to take the test. Many students below felt that she looked strangely familiar. Someone in the stands suddenly recognized her. They said she was Yan Hanshuo's adopted daughter, a girl who was originally an orphan. The girl had long black hair and wore a simple school uniform. Seeing her appear here left Xiao Wujin stunned. Today was truly a day full of unexpected reunions. The girl placed her hand on the scanner. A few seconds later, the results appeared. Her current level was C rank, and her potential was determined to be SS rank. The host was shocked by this result. He couldn't believe so many high-level talents had appeared today. The crowd also gasped in amazement. Some whispered to each other that if this was really Yan Hanshuo's adopted daughter, it was as if he himself had been reborn in a different form. Others lost all their confidence, joking that they might as well pack up and go home. The host hurriedly asked everyone to remain calm and signaled for security to maintain order. Only then did the assessment continue. Yun Qi quietly looked at the stage, carefully observing each student's result. He seemed to be waiting to see if any more S-rank talents would appear. Another student went up for the test and got an A-rank potential, but his current level was only D. Right after that, another student appeared with S-rank potential and a D-rank level. Yet another S-rank supernova Finally, it was Kai Jun's turn. He nervously walked up. He hesitantly placed his hand on the scanner. The machine indicated his potential was S rank, but his current level was a pathetic F rank. To be honest, Kai Jun felt utterly conflicted. Possessing S rank potential but still being stuck at the bottom of society at 15 years old made him feel bitter and ashamed. Many would mock people like him as just useless trash in a pretty package. When summarizing the results, the host loudly announced that 11 students had achieved A-rank potential or higher, among whom 4 had reached the S-rank potential threshold. These 15 outstanding students would have the special privilege of freely choosing any high school they wanted, along with a huge grant of up to 300,000. The instructor, Qing Gangjui, stood on the sidelines with his arms crossed, smiling faintly with satisfaction. Getting 4 S-rank potential students was an unexpected achievement. Meanwhile, Kai Jun stood among the high-potential elites feeling completely out of place, as if he were an outsider who didn't belong in their world at all. The host cleared his throat to prepare for the next part. He grandly invited everyone to welcome Yan Shi, the acting captain of the Divine T-Corps, to the stage to present the awards. However, before he could finish his sentence, a strange phenomenon suddenly appeared in midair. Ripples spread through the air as if space itself was being torn apart. Everyone looked up in horror. Just a few seconds later, the tier gradually widened and turned into a deep spatial portal. From the darkness of the portal, a series of giant monsters began to crawl out. The potential assessment should have had a perfect ending, but suddenly, the suffocating, murderous aura of an S-rank monster billowed over the entire arena. No one knew if this phenomenon was a random coincidence or a cruel, calculated move. One by one, massive, ferocious demon dragons squeezed out. They emerged from the portal, their bodies covered in pitch-black stone armor, their huge wings unfurled, blocking out the sun, accompanied by roars that tore through the atmosphere. Even the experienced instructors were frozen in place. Qing Gangjui was stunned, wondering how in the world an S-rank monster had just fallen from the sky at this very moment. In a flash, extreme panic spread throughout the arena. People screamed themselves hoarse, telling each other to run. Students screamed in despair as the swarm of monsters circled and then slammed down onto the ground. Wu Jin immediately sensed that something was wrong with this swarm of monsters. They appeared just as the evaluation was ending. The timing was too perfect. In his heart, he wondered if their target was this very flock of promising young lambs gathered here like easy prey. The entire arena had now devolved into a bloody chaos, with students fleeing for their lives in every direction, frantically trampling over one another in a desperate struggle for survival. Suddenly, several monsters in the air were struck by a fatal blow. A razor-sharp spear tore through the sky, plunging straight into the body of a demonic dragon as the weapon flashed with a brilliant light. It then shot back to its master's hand. The attacker was instructor Than Quang Tri, who had just used the basic skill weapon recall to command the spear to obediently fly back to him. After that terrifying throw, Than Quang Tri tightened his grip on the spear, his dagger-sharp gaze fixed on the flock of dragons circling overhead. He couldn't help but grit his teeth in frustration. His beloved S-rank spear, the Crimson Dragon's golden scale, had been heavily damaged in a dungeon battle a few days ago and was currently still at the forge. The only thing in his hand now was a familiar A-rank spear, the Azure Star Ring. He immediately spun around to the other instructors and nearby challengers. He ordered them to take responsibility for holding back the remaining B-rank demonic dragons, while he would fight the S-rank leader of the pack to the death. Everyone gave a curt nod and immediately rushed into the fray. Than Quang Tri locked his target on the largest dragon, reminding himself not to be rash. With the right strategy, using an A-rank weapon, to split the skull of an S-rank monster was entirely possible. However, before he could pinpoint the demonic dragon's fatal weakness, the people from the Divine Rhino Legion suddenly began to make their move. Yanhai gave a cold signal with his eyes. Sammo immediately understood his intentions. Without a second's hesitation, she stood up and pulled from her robes a gun with a bizarre design. And then she pulled the trigger. The gun didn't fire a normal bullet. Instead, a poison-tipped dart silently tore through the wind. It sank deep into the back of Than Quang Tri's neck. He immediately felt as if all his strength had been drained. His legs went limp and his body collapsed onto the cold ground. With his last bit of strength, he yanked the foreign object from his neck, horrified to discover it was a demonic syringe. The deadly poison had already seeped into his bloodstream, brutally suffocating his senses and bodily functions. This cowardly sneak attack had clearly come from behind. As his consciousness began to fade, a bitter realization tore through his mind. This attack had been a perfectly set trap from the very beginning. At the same time, a swarm of bloodthirsty dragons began to bombard the arena. They opened their jagged jaws, unleashing hellish rains of fire that scorched the earth. Pillars of flame roared, devouring everything in their path. As the crowd ran for their lives in desperation, a panicked official screamed that the demonic dragon's firepower was too much to handle another person. It bitterly pointed out the fatal flaw in their air defense. Their force of archers was paper-thin, meaning they were practically just sitting ducks for the flying monsters amidst the chaos and screams. Thang Quang Trui suddenly noticed a strange, lone figure still standing motionless a few steps away from him. The kid had absolutely no intention of running. Thang Quang Trui forced himself up and yelled, telling him that staying here was a death sentence and to get the hell out. But instead of fleeing for his life, Votan calmly bent down and picked up the spear lying beside him. Thang Quang Trui was petrified. Votan had just effortlessly lifted an A-rank spear. In that same moment, the unlimited level equipment system hidden deep within his soul silently awakened. Votan casually glanced at the cold weapon in his hand. He shrugged and told the trainer that it seemed he'd completely forgotten how to use a spear. And then, the limitless system finished its startup process. Thang Quang Trui's eyes went wide, completely frozen. Just being able to lift an A-rank divine weapon was a threshold that countless challengers could only dream of reaching after immense struggle. Yet Votan held it as if it were as light as a feather, as though this spear was born to be in his hands. Votan raised his sharp, cold eyes to the rampaging dragons and asked his trainer in a low voice if he could teach him a few basic moves. Around them, the entire arena was still drowning in cries and screams as the students could only run for their lives. In a hidden corner, the traitors from the Divine Rhino Legion watched intently. They put on an act, their faces showing the same utter horror as the rest of the crowd. Yanhai stared at Votan, unable to believe his eyes. He mentally slapped himself. How could a snot-nosed kid yet possibly lift an A-rank weapon? The red-haired mercenary from the Legion snapped, hissing through his teeth. This is absolutely impossible. There has to be a catch here. SAMMO added that even Yanhan Thak at 15 years old could only use a C-rank weapon. Yet this kid was holding an A-rank spear. She wondered if that was truly possible. The red-haired guy insisted that there had to be some kind of trick involved. Meanwhile, Kai Quan was completely stunned by everything happening around him. He even started to wonder if this was the real world anymore. A nearby student said that according to the records, Yanhan Thak first used an A-rank weapon at 59 years old. Clearly, Votan had achieved that 44 years sooner. A nervous bully asked his boss if they had just provoked someone they absolutely should not have. Another one muttered that this level of strength couldn't be described as human anymore. It was something only a god could do. More and more students began pointing at Votan. They remembered that he was the student with SSS rank potential who had just been tested. They stared at him in utter disbelief. He was clearly only 15, yet he held an A-rank weapon as if it were as light as a feather. Votan then turned back to his trainer. He calmly asked if the trainer was going to teach him how to use the spear, or not. Quang Tri tried to get up, his body weakened by the drug. He said that even if Votan could lift and swing the spear without basic training, it would be nearly impossible to hit anything. Votan replied, "Don't answer questions I didn't ask. I just want to know the technique for a charged spear thrust." Quang Tri looked at him for a moment. There was something about this kid that made him feel he could be trusted, so he quickly explained the technique. First, shift your center of gravity to the hand holding the spear. Brace your body as if you're drawing a reverse bow. Votan immediately adjusted his stance. Quang Tri continued to instruct. The arm holding the spear must be bent at a 90-degree angle. The hand gripping it must be brought behind your head to maintain accuracy. The tip of the spear must be on the same line as your right line of sight. Votan followed every instruction perfectly. He slowly drew the spear tip back while his eyes remained glued to the dragon circling above. This might be the first time he was using this skill again, but there was absolutely no room for error. Quang Tri told him the last step was simple. Throw the spear with unshakable conviction. Votan slowly exhaled. Then he launched the spear. The weapon shot forward like a bolt of lightning. The tip tore through the air at an incredible speed. 2 seconds later, it pierced straight through the dragon's neck. The blade sliced through the thick scales with terrifying precision. The dragon's head was severed from its body as if something had just exploded. The massive head plummeted from the sky, while its body came crashing down with a roar right after. The attack was executed with such perfect precision it was almost as if Wu Jin had done it countless times before. The truth about S-rank demon dragons is simple. Their fire breaths are extremely fast and powerful, but their physical bodies are not entirely indestructible. Wu Jin and the coach watched the colossal corpse fall from the sky. A moment later, Wu Jin calmly explained that to deal with a fire-breathing dragon, one only needs to target the flame conversion point, on its neck, by injecting a small amount of catalyst at that spot. The dragon would be forced to self-destruct right then and there. A metal box fell to the ground nearby. Inside it was a special type of gasoline mixed with ether and other substances. When combined with the catalyst, it could create a combustion reaction that was many times more powerful. Immediately, Wu Jin glanced at the coach and told him that he should remember this. It was known as the secret technique of a challenger who specialized in hunting fire-breathing dragons. No one present realized the truth. The challenger who had created that technique was standing right in front of them under the guise of Xiao Wu Jin. The dragon's massive body fell from the air and slammed onto the ground. The entire arena was plunged into a stunned silence. Jiang Qi then recalled the time Yan Han Shuo had told him to remember a skill. That person had once said that the method just used was his exclusive secret for killing fire-breathing dragons. Wait a minute. Those were the exact same words Wu Jin had just said. The moment he heard those words, the image of a person flashed in the coach's mind. The sentence Wu Jin had just uttered sounded almost identical to what Han Shuo had once said. Around them, the other students were still staring in amazement. They had just witnessed Wu Jin take down an S-rank demon dragon with a single blow. Someone started yelling that he was a genius. Another student loudly declared that he was definitely a genius who far surpassed Yan Han Shuo. One student said that he had heard of a method to counter fire-breathing dragons before. But even so, what Wu Jin had just done was still too extraordinary. While everyone was still discussing in disbelief, the members of the Godly Tea Legion were gathered together nearby. SAMMO quietly asked what Yan Shi thought about what just happened. Her voice sounded as if she was waiting for their new captain to pass judgment. Meanwhile, the situation in the arena had not yet completely settled. A few B-rank demon dragons were still flying around. A couple of coaches and challengers were still fighting them. Some students also stepped up to help the coaches handle the remaining monsters. However, Kai Jun and another student with long blonde hair remained standing in place. He told the others that they should leave this to the coaches as it seemed like the better option. "What a bunch of show-offs," the blonde-haired girl said. Not long after Wu Jin helped the injured Jiang Qi up, he calmly asked if he could still stand, or if he wanted to lie down for a bit longer. The coach regained his balance and replied that he could stand. The drug he was injected with earlier seemed to have only a short-term effect, so his strength was gradually returning. As he stood there, Jiang Qi couldn't stop thinking about what Wu Jin had said earlier. He wondered if it was just a coincidence. Just then, the Godly Tea Legion began to advance towards them. They stopped a few steps away from Wu Jin and Jiang Qi. Shi even clapped his hands slowly, as if applauding Wu Jin's performance. He said that it was truly not in vain, that their Godly Tea Legion had come here in person. After all, they had finally met an unprecedentedly talented youth. He was clearly referring to Wu Jin. Wu Jin looked at them coldly, fury flashing in his eyes, but he still forced himself to suppress it. Shi then turned to the coach and apologized. He explained that everything that had just happened was an order from their superiors. According to him, they wanted to test the adaptability of the contestants in this competition. That was why they had arranged for the demon dragons to suddenly descend. And because of this plan, they were forced to use some tricks to prevent the coaches from interfering. Jiang Qi looked at him with great suspicion. He replied in a cold tone, "So this so-called order from your superiors included using an S-rank demon dragon to test a group of 15-year-old challengers." He sarcastically added that they sure knew how to get things done. Shi replied that after Yan Han Shuo's death, they were in desperate need of new combat forces, so he hoped everyone would understand the reason behind their decision. Just then, Wu Jin suddenly spoke up. He directly addressed Yan Shi as Senior Yan Shi. Both Yan Shi and Gong Shui looked at him, waiting to see what he wanted to say. Then Wu Jin asked a simple question. He asked if Captain Yan Han Shuo had any last words for them before he died. Yan Shi replied that their captain did indeed leave a few last words. SAMMO interjected, adding that time was too short back then. She started to say that the captain didn't have, but before she could finish, Yan Shi cut her off. He hurriedly said that Captain Han Shuo only told them not to feel guilty. He said the captain had told them that only by living well would they be worthy of his sacrifice. Wujin listened in silence. In his heart, he almost laughed. Yan Shi and the rest of the Godly Tea Legion continued. They said they had never told these words to reporters before because they couldn't bear to bring it up again. They even said that they always felt guilty towards their captain. To outsiders, it sounded very sincere, but in reality, most of them were just putting on an act. A few members of the Legion even looked tired of having to continue this charade. Wujin simply replied flatly that he understood. Jiang Qi quietly observed Wujin's reaction. Then Wujin added one more sentence. If that was the case, then he sincerely wished them all the best. He told them to fully enjoy the new life that Captain Han Shuo had given them. He even added that they should dare to live on. Endless stared intently at the members of the Legion. In his mind, their words carried a clear threat, but on the outside, his expression remained perfectly calm. Yan Shi simply replied that they would. Then Endless walked right past them as he left. Yan Shi spoke up again from behind him, saying that since the competition was now over, the Endless should enjoy the treatment of a moon surrounded by 1,000 stars. Endless didn't reply. In his head, he cursed them, thinking to himself, what a shameless bunch of people. Before he could even finish his thought, a crowd of students suddenly rushed towards him. They immediately surrounded him. Some asked for autographs, while others loudly cheered for him, as if he were a celebrity. Amidst the chaos, an official approached and politely invited him to follow them to a higher-level testing device for further evaluation. Not far away, a few students were still fighting the remaining dragons. One of them complained that Endless had really stolen the show today, and for some reason it rubbed them the wrong way. Suddenly, several cars sped directly into the arena. The nearby students were all stunned to see this. The door of one car opened and a woman stepped out carrying a heavy Gatling gun. She yelled that she would only say this once. All of you get lost right now or else. Every single one of you will get a taste of the bullets from my Gatling gun. The man standing next to her also shouted loudly. He berated the students, telling them they were just a bunch of snot-nosed brats. This is a national competition, not some marketplace for your ridiculous fan antics. The students surrounding Endless immediately noticed the woman's weapon. They quickly dispersed and fled. Just then, an old man jumped out of another car and rushed towards Endless. He worriedly asked if he was hurt. He kept blaming himself for not protecting him properly. The old man then hurriedly told Endless to get in the car so he could take him to a safe place to rest. This old man was one of the 4 headmasters of the 4 major high schools. He was the headmaster of Vuba High School. Before he could finish speaking, another old man in a brown suit suddenly kicked him aside. He angrily told him to get lost and asked who he thought he was to try and take Endless away. This man was also one of the 4 headmasters of the major high schools. He was the headmaster of Lang Ho High School. Not far away, another old man in a white suit was standing. He was the headmaster of Than Phong High School. The surrounding students were stunned, immediately recognizing them. The headmasters of the 4 major high schools had all come here in person. A student whispered that they must have heard about this teenage genius's performance, which is why they rushed here to recruit him. A few students looked at Endless with eyes full of envy. The headmaster of Lang Ho High School spoke first. He said there was no need to beat around the bush. If Endless chose to enroll in their school, they would directly transfer 8,800,000 into his personal account. The headmaster of Than Phong High School immediately countered. He said that if Endless came to their school, they would arrange to have a complete set of A-rank equipment custom forged for him. At that moment, the headmaster of Vuba High School shouted loudly. He declared that he would go even bigger. If Endless came to Vuba High School, they would forge an S-rank weapon for him. He even promised that the weapons department would personally craft an exclusive S-rank weapon just for him. He added proudly that Vuba High School possessed the capability to craft weapons of the highest standard, something everyone surely knew. One of the other headmasters thought to himself that even as a headmaster, he couldn't escape these kinds of competitive bidding situations. Another headmaster mentally calculated that the cheapest S-rank weapon on the market currently cost nearly 30 million, and yet this old geezer was casually offering one as a gift. He was clearly going all in. Just then a voice rang out from inside a black car parked nearby. The man sitting in the car said, "It seems these old men still don't get the point." The other headmasters immediately turned to look at the car, instantly recognizing the person inside. The door slowly opened and the man stepped out. He calmly said that true powerhouses would never accept cheap handouts. He pulled out a black card and held it up high. He said that for someone truly talented, the only thing of value is this: the Space-Time Gate Black Card. A universal access card valid for all ranks, all types of gates, and all privileges. This man was the head of the 4 major high schools, the headmaster of Kim Chau High School. At that very moment, a small notification appeared before Endless, visible only to him. Revenge. Progress. Display 1%. Seriously, everyone. I'm speechless with this manhwa. We're only at 1% and it's already this freaking insane. The black card had a golden dragon engraved on its face. When the headmaster flipped it over to show everyone the back, the other headmasters immediately recognized it. The expressions on their faces changed in unison. One of them even had to wipe the sweat from his brow, knowing full well that their offers couldn't possibly compete with that. Another headmaster spoke up in a serious tone. He said that from what he knew, this rankless universal black card had only ever been possessed by one challenger before. That person was Yan Han Shuo, who had passed away not long ago. None of them realized that Yan Han Shuo was actually standing right there among them. At this very moment, Wu Jin carefully examined the card before speaking. He asked what the condition was. He also asked if accepting this card meant he had to enroll in their school. His question brought back a memory from when Han Shuo was still alive. In the principal's office of Jinzhou High School, the principal was also giving an identical black card to Han Shuo. The principal told him it was a congratulatory gift for becoming the first SSS rank challenger. He explained that this item had been specially requested from the nation and was created exclusively for him. Han Shuo stood silently in front of the desk. He took the black card, held it in his hand, and observed it carefully. After looking at it for a moment, he asked, "What are the conditions for such a valuable item?" He even guessed if the condition was to become the school's spokesperson. The principal shook his head. He said that whether Han Shuo agreed or not, the black card would still be given to him. It was a gesture of sincerity. Back in the present, the principal repeated the exact same explanation. He said that sincerity means, regardless of the outcome, the gift will still be given. This principal had a large scar across his eye. Without any hesitation, he tossed the black card towards Wu Jin, who calmly caught it with 2 fingers. The scarred principal then turned and walked towards his car. Before leaving, he told Wu Jin he didn't need to give him an answer immediately. Whenever he had thought it through, he just needed to come find him. As the car started to pull away, the other principals were clearly annoyed. One of them complained that the old man didn't even leave them a single chance. Only Jinzhou High School could request something like the black card. Someone angrily pointed out that Jinzhou High School had the nation's backing. By the time things settled down, it was already night. Most of the students had gone home, but some continued to follow Wu Jin as he had become famous overnight. Because Kai Jun came from a wealthy family, he had arrived in a private car and Wu Jin ended up riding with him. As the car moved, Wu Jin leaned back in his seat and said he was grateful to have finally shaken off the followers. Kai Jun casually waved his hand, saying it was no big deal. Then he asked Wu Jin if he was planning to go home. If so, he just needed to give the address to the driver. Wu Jin thought for a moment before answering. He said they should go to Kai Jun's house instead. Kai Jun was very surprised. Wu Jin explained that after what happened today, he stood out too much and there was always a chance someone might target him. Compared to his own house, Kai Jun's would be safer, because his father was an SS rank challenger. Kai Jun eagerly agreed. In fact, he looked absolutely thrilled. The once-in-a-millennium genius would actually be staying at his house. He even thought to himself that he had to take hundreds of photos as souvenirs. Wu Jin joked that after going through all that trouble to escape his followers, it turned out Kai Jun was one of them. Just then, a notification appeared in front of Wu Jin. 2 new alerts showed up. First, an advancement mission has appeared. Complete the mission to receive an A-rank blade. Condition: clear a B-rank dungeon alone. Second, because the host has been reborn, you will be given a chance to reselect your class. Wu Jin quietly thought about this message. Clearing a B-rank dungeon alone was normally impossible. Even with the help of the level unlimited system, it was still extremely dangerous. However, second alert made him think about something else. Since he had decided to change his weapon type, perhaps he should also reconsider his class. After all, his original class was a swordsman. That class was more suited for a light blade than a heavy blade. He decided not to think too deeply about it for the time being, because there was something else he wanted to do first. After a moment of silence, Wu Jin suddenly spoke up. He asked Kai Jun if they could stop by somewhere else before heading home. Kai Jun looked worried. He immediately said that he promised not to bother him if that was what Wu Jin was concerned about. Wu Jin shook his head. It wasn't that. It was just that there was someone he wanted to see. Afterwards, Kai Jun could send someone to pick him up. Not long after the car stopped in front of an apartment building. Wu Jin got out and went inside. as he entered the building. He thought to himself that in this world, there was only one person he could talk to with complete honesty. Even so, when Wu Jin arrived at the apartment door, he still hesitated for a moment. His hand stopped in midair, before he slowly knocked. The sound of knocking echoed faintly in the quiet hallway. For a few seconds, there was no response. Then a voice called out from inside the apartment saying they were coming to the door. Wu Jin waited outside, trying to stay calm, but for some reason he still felt uneasy. A moment later, the door unlocked. The instant Wu Jin saw the person standing in the doorway, his entire body froze. It was Yan Shi. For a brief second, neither of them moved. Wu Jin couldn't comprehend what he was seeing. Why was Yan Shi here? This was supposed to be Lin Ding's house. Yan Shi clearly didn't expect to see him either. His face showed clear astonishment as he stared at Wu Jin standing outside the door. Before either of them could speak, Lin Ding suddenly appeared from behind Yan Shi. She looked curious and asked who Yan Shi was talking to. Yan Shi then turned to Wu Jin with a cold expression. He asked if it was really him, then questioned what Wu Jin was doing visiting another man's fiancée in the middle of the night. Hearing those words made Wu Jin both angry and indignant, but of course, he couldn't reveal his true identity, so he quickly came up with a story. He said that he was actually Han Shuo's sworn brother. He then explained that his brother had never mentioned him publicly over the years, so Lin Ding probably didn't know about him. He said he came today to give her something. When Lin Ding heard that, her expression immediately changed. A hint of sadness flashed in her eyes. Wu Jin continued saying that it was an important memento that belonged to his brother before he passed away. And you've kept it all this time. Yan Shi listened, thinking to himself that this explained at least in part why. A moment ago he had felt that this kid bore a strange resemblance to Han Shuo. Now it all made sense. If he was Han Shuo's sworn brother, that resemblance wasn't surprising at all. Yan Shi then pretended that Han Shuo had mentioned this younger brother a few times while he was alive and said that he remembered hearing about him. That was why he invited Wu Chen inside. Inwardly, Wu Chen couldn't help but think that this guy really couldn't stop acting, not even for a single moment. The three of them walked into the apartment. Wu Chen quietly observed his surroundings. This was a place he had once been incredibly familiar with. So much of the furniture inside was still exactly as it had been. The layout hadn't changed much, but the person standing here now was different. After a moment of silence, Wu Chen suddenly spoke up. He asked one more question. He pointed out that Yan Shi had just said Ling Ding was another man's fiancée. If that was the case, why was he here at this hour? Yan Shi seemed a little taken aback by the question. He looked at Wu Chen for a moment, then let out a soft laugh, saying Wu Chen must have misunderstood something. His tone was nonchalant, as if the situation were completely normal. Yan Shi went on to explain that the man he had referred to earlier as the fiancé was, in fact, himself. He was Ling Ding's fiancé. The words struck Wu Chen like an unexpected blow. For a moment his mind went completely blank and his body froze solid. The girl he loved, the woman who had stood shoulder to shoulder with him in his past life, was now engaged to the very man who had betrayed him. He had imagined many scenarios before coming here, but never this one. He said the wedding was set for 1 month from now. He and Ling Ding would be officially married. Those words echoed relentlessly in Wu Chen's mind. As Yan Shi calmly declared that he and Ling Ding would be married in a month, each word felt like a knife twisting in Wu Chen's chest. For Han Shuo, no. For the man now living as Wu Chen, this was almost too much to bear. Before Wu Chen could say anything, Ling Ding suddenly spoke up. Her expression was furious as she instantly denied it. She said she had never agreed to any marriage. Her parents had no right to make a decision like that for her. She told Yan Shi to stop spreading baseless rumors. Her voice was filled with indignation and disbelief, but Yan Shi remained completely unfazed. He even seemed amused by her reaction. He simply replied nonchalantly that as far as he knew, her parents had started sending out wedding invitations early that morning. The school relatives, family friends, everyone had already received the news. Ling Ding stared at him in shock and asked if he was being serious. Yan Shi nodded nonchalantly and added something that made the atmosphere even heavier. He said that in the 6 years Ling Ding had dated Han Shuo, her parents had never been so proactive. Not about anything. But now they were moving things along so quickly. It seemed that in their eyes Yan Shi was a far more suitable match than a certain someone's sworn little brother. The words were clearly laced with deep sarcasm. Wu Chen's expression darkened as a fire of rage ignited within him. For a few seconds no one said a word. The room plunged into a suffocating silence, and then suddenly Wu Chen burst out laughing. The sound took both of them by surprise. He laughed as if Yan Shi had just said something utterly ridiculous. He said that he finally understood something now. No wonder. My brother Han Shuo was always able to put Yan Shi in his place when he was alive, and no wonder he was the one who got to be with Sister Ling Ding. As he spoke, Wu Chen casually stepped forward and patted Yan Shi lightly on the chest. His tone was mocking, but every word was razor-sharp. He said that if he were Sister Ling Ding, he wouldn't agree to marry Yan Shi either. After all, every time Yan Shi opens his mouth, he has to bring her parents into it. Then Wu Chen casually leaned back on the sofa looking completely relaxed before adding one more thing. He said that if someone who didn't know any better were to listen to Yan Shi talk, they might think he wasn't actually trying to pursue Ling Ding. Instead, it sounds like he's trying to start a love triangle with Ling Ding and her parents. The comment instantly enraged Yan Shi, but Ling Ding was also taken aback. She stared intently at Wu Chen, unsure if he was joking or being serious. For some reason, the way he spoke felt strangely familiar. A memory suddenly flooded Ling Ding's mind. Back when Han Shuo was still alive, they had sat together in this very living room. They had even sat on this exact sofa. Back then, they had been talking about her parents, too. Han Shuo had joked that it didn't matter if he didn't get along with her parents. After all, he wasn't planning on starting a love triangle with them. The memory made Ling Ding freeze. That was why Wu Chen's words had sounded so familiar to her. She couldn't explain why. But something about this young man reminded her so strongly of Han Shuo, even though he had never once mentioned this little brother before. Yan Shi quickly cut the conversation short. He asked Wu Chen what item he had come to deliver and told him to hand it over. Wu Chen tilted his head slightly and smiled. He asked if Yan Shi was really trying to assert his dominance in front of a 15-year-old kid, and he even joked that he seemed pretty aggressive about it. Then Wu Chen slowly took out a small red box. He held it carefully in his hands, his tone growing a little more somber. He said that before his brother Han Shuo passed away, he had personally instructed him. He had to deliver this item to Sister Ling Ding and to give it to her and her alone. Model, no outsiders should be present for this. Wu Jin looked directly into Yan Shi's eyes, his gaze seeming to hold a profound message. And then he added that it was strange. He believed that Han Shuo should have brought it himself, but it seemed he had encountered some unexpected accident and didn't get the chance. Yan Shi cleared his throat. He knew exactly what Wu Jin was insinuating. Meanwhile, tears had started to stream down Ling Ding's face. She wiped them away and gently told Yan Shi he should leave. Han Shuo's keepsake was incredibly important to her, and she wanted to receive it alone. Yan Shi seemed surprised by her request, but he had no reason to refuse. So he picked up his coat, and as he put it on, he left one final reminder: the wedding invitations have already been sent out. And if Ling Ding tried to change anything now, her parents wouldn't have an easy time dealing with the consequences. Hearing this, Ling Ding's stomach churned. Everything was happening too fast. She couldn't even begin to process it all. Yan Shi walked out the door and left the apartment. The door closed behind him, and now only Wu Jin and Ling Ding were left in the room. Wu Jin placed the small red box on the table and then spoke calmly. He said that bastard was probably waiting for him in the hallway so he would leave through the study window. Ling Ding looked visibly surprised. How did he know about the study window? Another memory suddenly surfaced in her mind from back when Han Shuo used to visit her in secret. Once her parents had knocked on the door unexpectedly, and she had hurriedly told Han Shuo to escape through the study window, since from there he could get to the rooftop without being seen. Ling Ding looked at Wu Jin again. How could this kid know about that? Just then, Wu Jin walked to the study. He opened the window, looked out to gauge the distance to the rooftop, and before climbing out, he turned back and said one last thing: "See you again." Those simple words immediately brought tears to Ling Ding's eyes because Han Shuo used to say the exact same thing every time he left through that window. Tears welled up in the corners of her eyes. Inside the apartment, Ling Ding remained rooted in front of the open window, standing motionless for a long time. Meanwhile, on the rooftop of the apartment building, Wu Jin was sitting near the edge. From where he sat, the entire city skyline stretched out before him. He told himself that he had exactly 1 month. 1 month before the wedding. In that short amount of time, he had to find a way to discover the weaknesses of Yan Shi and the others, no matter the cost. He had to stop that wedding from happening. Just as he was thinking about this, a notification suddenly appeared before his eyes. Stage 1, mission complete. New mission: obtain an A-rank blade. Condition: clear a B-rank dungeon solo. Wu Jin frowned slightly as he read the message. His original plan was different. He had intended to complete the class change mission first. That way he could choose a new profession, one that was more suited to the heavy blade style he had just decided to use. His old swordsman class was better for lighter swords, not heavy weapons. But now the situation had changed and time was no longer on his side. If he wanted to challenge Yan Shi and stop the wedding, he needed to get stronger as soon as possible. There was no more time to hesitate. Wu Jin slowly reached into his pocket and took out the black card the headmaster had given him earlier. A moment later, Wu Jin put the card away and took out his phone. He dialed Kaijun's number. The call connected quickly on the other end. Kaijun immediately asked if Wu Jin wanted him to come pick him up. But Wu Jin asked about something else. He asked if Kaijun could help him find a nearby B-rank dungeon that hadn't been conquered yet. Kaijun sounded a little confused but started searching right away. A moment later, he found one. He then asked what Wu Jin was planning to do. Wu Jin didn't hesitate to answer. He calmly said he was going to challenge the dungeon alone. A solo run. As he said those words, he was still clutching the black card in his hand. Meanwhile, outside the apartment building, Kaijun's driver was still waiting. The night air was getting colder and he was shivering. He wondered why the kid hadn't come down yet. Then he muttered to himself, "Surely that kid isn't planning to stay on the rooftop all night, is he?" This was the first time our protagonist had entered a B-rank dungeon alone in all these years. The moment he stepped inside, the place looked exactly like a desolate city. Broken chunks of concrete covered the ground everywhere. Buildings had either collapsed or were half destroyed, and piles of rubble blocked the paths. Dust hung in the cold air, and everything looked gray and lifeless. Wu Jin walked slowly through the deserted streets, his footsteps echoing softly on the pavement. It was cracked as he moved forward, calmly observing his surroundings. At the same time, he was also checking his equipment. Right now, he had equipped several items. Blazing armor, a C-rank chest piece. Silver Star Swift boots, a pair of C-rank shoes, the Blue Feather Helm, a C-rank helmet, and Power Gauntlets, a pair of C-rank gauntlets. All of these had been gathered by Kaijun at the last minute. Wu Jin paused for a moment and opened his character status window. His stats had increased significantly after putting on the gear. He briefly wondered how Kaijun had managed to prepare everything so quickly. Even with extensive connections, collecting so much C-rank gear in such a short time was no easy feat. After all, a 15-year-old boy entering a B-rank dungeon alone was something almost unheard of. Most challengers wouldn't dare attempt such a thing. Wu Jin continued to walk deeper into the desolate city. Compared to dungeons below C-rank, the biggest difference in a B-rank dungeon was the appearance of elite monsters. These monsters could appear randomly among regular mobs, and sometimes they appeared without any warning, making the situation much more dangerous if they weren't dealt with properly. They can be more annoying than the final boss of an endless instance. Wu Jin continued on his way. As he scanned the empty streets, he silently wondered what kind of instance this was. Beasts, robots, or perhaps skeletal demons. Just as he was pondering, a figure suddenly appeared behind him. A monster rose up just a few meters away, a portion of its skull missing, revealing part of its brain. Without hesitation, the zombie charged and lunged straight at Wu Jin, but he remained perfectly calm. In his previous life, he had reached SSS rank, so compared to his combat experience at that level, a B-rank instance was nothing more than a warm-up for him. These monsters were no threat at all. He calmly summoned his blade, and the heavy weapon materialized in his hand. Without even fully turning around, he thrust his blade backward. The blade pierced through the zombie's chest. The attack was clean and effortless. A system notification appeared. Current challenger level C rank. B-rank monster defeated. Over-level kill confirmed. The unlimited level system has been activated. Wu Jin glanced at the message for a moment before turning his attention back to his surroundings. This instance had an infectious attribute. Instances like these usually test a challenger's endurance and mental resistance. Just then, another sound came from behind him. Several zombies burst out from the surrounding rubble almost at the same time. Wu Jin narrowed his eyes slightly. Quite a few had shown up. He quickly realized something among the equipment Kaijun had prepared for him. There wasn't a single necklace that boosted mental resistance. That meant he absolutely could not let himself be bitten. Even a single infection could affect his body and his mental state. If the virus spread through his body, it could weaken his strength and impair his consciousness. The horde of zombies began to charge at him. Some carried broken weapons, others attacked with their claws. They rushed him from various directions at once. Wu Jin didn't wait for them to surround him. He changed his stance and charged forward. His blade swung horizontally. The heavy blade sliced through the first zombie's neck. Before the corpse could even fall, Wu Jin took another step, another slash. The blade cut across at another zombie's chest, splitting it open. The third zombie lunged from the side. Wu Jin spun around and brought his blade down hard. Notifications continuously popped up in front of him. B-rank monster defeated. Over-level kill. Experience points gained. But after a few exchanges, Wu Jin started to realize something. This blade was too heavy. Although its power was immense, its weight slowed him down slightly, and sometimes he had to use extra effort just to swing the blade. At that moment, a zombie suddenly grabbed him from behind. There was no time to swing the blade. Instead, Wu Jin delivered a kick, planting his foot squarely in the zombie's chest. The force of the kick was so strong it sent the creature flying several meters away. Wu Jin slowly exhaled. Using such a heavy blade was still too unfamiliar. When he rested it on the ground, its weight even cracked the concrete beneath it. But there was no turning back. More and more zombies were appearing from all directions. So Wu Jin made a split-second decision. He threw the blade forward with all his might. The heavy weapon spun through the air, like a giant saw slamming into a zombie and knocking it down instantly. He then activated a common skill, weapon recall. The blade flashed and flew straight back into his hand, but the number of zombies just kept increasing. It was as if for every one he killed, 2 more would spawn. Wu Jin let out a tired sigh. His patience was wearing thin. A faint purple aura slowly began to emanate from his body. He lifted his blade again. Blue and purple energy started to converge along the blade. Then he swung it. A massive wave of blade energy shot forward like a lightning bolt. The attack tore through a whole line of zombies, all at once. Their bodies were instantly severed. Blood splattered across the desolate street as dozens of zombies collapsed simultaneously. This skill was called Demon Slash. Our protagonist continued to transform into a butchering machine. The attack swept through so quickly it looked like a fleeting explosion on the battlefield. In just a few seconds, dozens of zombies had been cut down. When the dust settled, zombie corpses were scattered all over the concrete. This time, the rubble and blood stained the entire street red. Wu Jin casually sat down on a large slab of concrete. He took out a recovery potion and chugged it down while his fatigue meter showed 147 out of 150. Although he was uninjured, his stamina consumption was much higher than expected. Using a greatsword required far more energy. On top of that, he couldn't even use the skills that were exclusive to light swords right now. He could only rely on common skills and his physical strength. There were a few times during the battle when he had almost been injured. He recalled the moment just now, when the zombie had suddenly appeared right behind him. At that time, he had no choice but to kick it away. Meanwhile, on the roof of a nearby dilapidated building, 2 figures stood silently. They were also zombies, but they looked much stronger than the ones Wu Jin had just fought. One was completely wrapped in bandages. The other looked like a woman with a long metal bolt pierced through her head. These 2 elite zombies had been watching the entire battle. They had seen clearly just how easily Wu Jin had wiped out their zombie underlings. Of course, Wu Jin had already noticed them too. He looked up and stared right at them. Elite monsters. But something was very strange. Usually, elite monsters would appear alongside the smaller mobs, and yet, these 2 had hidden in the back waiting until the last minute. Suddenly, the female zombie unleashed a vicious purple aura. A moment later, something unexpected happened. The zombies that Wu Jin had just killed began to stir. One by one, the corpses sluggishly rose to their feet. This elite monster had the ability to resurrect the dead. Wu Jin quickly understood their plan. Since he was alone, they intended to overwhelm him with sheer numbers to win. A slow war of attrition. The 2 elite zombies looked down at him with smug expressions, believing the tables had turned in their favor. Meanwhile, Wu Jin remained calmly seated on the concrete block, his blade still stuck in the ground right beside him. Then suddenly the newly revived zombies unexpectedly exploded one after another. Their bodies blew to pieces before they could even take a few steps. The elite zombies were frozen in disbelief. Wu Jin slowly stood up even though his level had dropped back to C rank. Even after returning to his younger body, the titles he'd earned in his past life were still with him. The just-activated effect was called Zombie Death God. A system notification appeared. Zombie Death God. An effect that inflicts permanent death on zombies, nullifying any and all abilities for regeneration, recovery, or resurrection. Condition to obtain. Slay 10,000 zombies. Votan let out a taunt at the 2 monsters, saying this was a title he'd earned years ago. When he was 18, he spent months on end grinding the zombie dungeon to level up as fast as possible. Their parents, grandparents, aunts, and uncles probably all died by his hand. Who knew? Our protagonist added that during that time he had killed so many zombies that to him they were nothing more than walking experience points. Both elite monsters were completely enraged. They immediately charged toward him. A system notification appeared. Elite monster has gone berserk. Attack power increased by 30. While the 1% by defense power decreased by 30%. Votan calmly took a defensive stance, as everything was going exactly as planned. If he timed it right, he could finish them off in mid-air. But just as he prepared to strike, the ground suddenly began to shake violently. A deep, dull rumble echoed throughout the ruined city as chunks of concrete and stone began to crumble from the surrounding buildings. Votan looked around, slightly confused. Even the elite zombies stopped in their tracks and glanced into the distance. And then something enormous appeared. A giant zombie was lumbering toward them from the far end of the desolate city. The creature was as tall as several buildings combined, with massive spikes driven deep into its head. Its abdomen was split open, revealing a squirming mass of bones inside. Every one of its footsteps made the very ground tremble. Then a series of system notifications appeared all at once. Warning: the boss has been enraged. The challenger's actions have triggered an early appearance. Rewards increased by 200%. Votan looked up at the giant zombie boss. For the first time since entering the dungeon, his expression finally turned a bit more serious. The situation had obviously just gotten a lot more complicated. The giant began to search for him. The absolute worst thing about soloing a dungeon is having to fight multiple enemies at once. It makes you completely lose any advantage you have from your stats. He had a speed advantage over the female zombie, but was at a disadvantage in attack power against the giant and in health points against the male zombie. While trying to escape the monster, Votan reminded himself not to panic. The boss was moving very slowly. He began to calculate his next steps. First, he had to maintain distance from the boss, then wait for the others to catch up so he could take them out. But when he glanced back, that wasn't what was happening. The elite zombies had stayed behind. Then something started emerging from the giant's mouth. A concrete pillar. Where the hell did that come from? And with a great roar, it spat the concrete block straight toward Votan. The massive slab flew through the air like a missile. Seeing it hurtling toward him, Votan instantly dodged to the side. The moment the slab slammed into the building behind him, a deafening crash echoed throughout the desolate city. The impact was so powerful that the building's entire wall exploded into shattered concrete and large debris. The building itself cracked and partially collapsed from the force. On the other side of the battlefield, the bandaged zombie spoke in a strange language. Though he couldn't understand the words, the meaning was perfectly clear. It was asking if the slab had crushed Votan. The two elite zombies began to walk toward the thick cloud of dust, but they failed to notice one thing. Votan was already on the move, using the dust cloud for cover. He silently dashed forward. The moment he saw an opening, he attacked without hesitation. His warglaive swung in a wide arc, the blade slicing clean through the bandaged zombie's arm. Its hand dropped to the ground. Just then the female zombie leaped back. The bandaged zombie staggered backward. The female zombie quickly moved to shield him, speaking again in that strange language. She was clearly asking if he was all right. The bandaged zombie nodded, replying that the attack had been a close call. Then something terrifying happened. The severed arm began to grow back. Flesh slowly reformed until the hand was completely restored. Votan narrowed his eyes. Just as he'd predicted, the bandaged zombie was a regeneration-type elite monster. His original plan was to take its head off with a single strike, but the warglaive he was using was heavier than his usual weapon. That tiny delay gave the zombie just enough time to react. The perfect ambush had gone to waste. Votan and the two elite zombies faced off, all of them shifting into a combat stance. At that moment, the boss zombie let out a roar. A ferocious roar shook the entire desolate city. It was clearly hunting for Votan. A moment later, the colossal creature had drawn closer, now only a few meters away. Another system notification appeared. Boss monster enraged. Attack power increased by 30%. Defense power decreased by 30%. Votan quickly analyzed the situation. The boss was the most immediate threat. If he could take it out first, the rest of the fight would be much easier. Without wasting a second, he charged straight ahead. His body shot forward at top speed, sliding between the giant's legs and ducking right under its massive frame. He quickly closed in on the boss from behind. A system prompt appeared before his eyes. Weakness detected. Attacking this area will inflict 300% defense piercing damage. Votan raised his glaive and prepared to bring it down, but before the blade could make contact, the female zombie suddenly lunged forward, her weapon crashing against Votan's glaive. The impact brought his attack to a dead stop. She had deliberately taken the blow to protect the boss. Even though the zombie boss was facing away, it still sensed the attack from behind. The boss instantly grew even more frantic, its giant hand slamming down hard. Its massive palm crashed down onto the ground with terrifying force. The shockwave shook the entire area, shattering the concrete and splitting the earth. Fortunately, both Votan and the female zombie jumped, back at the last second. But just as Votan regained his balance, the bandaged zombie suddenly appeared behind him. Before Votan could react, the zombie grabbed his arm and bit down hard. Its rotting teeth sank deep into his flesh. Votan immediately swung back to counter, but he felt something was wrong. His body suddenly felt incredibly heavy. A warning notification appeared. Infection detected. HP decreasing by 36 per second. Speed decreased. Attack power decreased. The infection was already starting to spread. Votan's expression grew grim. The elite zombies quickly realized what had happened, seeing that the tables had turned. They began to taunt him in their grotesque language. At the same time, a colossal shadow suddenly fell over Endless. The boss zombie had lifted its massive foot. It stomped down with such terrifying force that the ground exploded on impact. A huge crater even formed right where its foot landed. Luckily, Endless managed to leap away, narrowly avoiding being crushed. By now, the situation had become extremely dangerous. His body was weakening from the infection. Meanwhile, the boss was relentless in its attacks, and the elite zombies were still in hot pursuit. His only option now was to run. Endless spun around and dashed through the rubble. He needed time to come up with another plan, but he hadn't gotten far when that she-zombie suddenly appeared, blocking his way and taunting him once more. Clearly, she was confident he couldn't escape. Endless immediately threw a punch, but the she-zombie's reflexes were faster. In the next second, her blade flashed. One of Endless's arms was sliced clean off. Excruciating pain shot through him instantly. The two elite zombies now stood towering before him, both staring down at him. It was as if the battle was already decided. Endless's mind was reeling. This was just a B-rank dungeon. For someone who had reached the SSS rank threshold, this should have been a piece of cake. But of course, the zombie virus infection had weakened him far too much. Before he could even move, a giant hand suddenly clenched around him. The boss zombie had caught him. Its grip was terrifyingly strong, and it slowly lifted him towards its mouth. Dozens of enormous fangs filled its hideous maw, and without hesitation, the boss shoved him inside. Endless fell onto the monster's gigantic tongue. The stench was disgusting. He slid deeper into the creature's mouth and fell straight into its stomach. Everything around him was pitch black and submerged in thick acid. Outside the B-rank dungeon, Kaituan and his driver were still waiting. They stood near the entrance to the time-space gate. Suddenly, a black car pulled up in front of them. The door opened, and the person who stepped out was none other than the principal of Kim Hoa High School. He immediately asked what they were doing there. Kaituan looked astonished. The principal calmly explained that the black card given to Endless had a tracker installed. When the card detected a B-rank time-space gate had just opened, he immediately guessed who was responsible. It could only be that reckless kid. Kaituan was stunned as he had no idea the card contained a tracking device. The principal simply replied that it was necessary. After all, even Yen Han, that was only able to clear a B-rank dungeon alone when he was 18 years old. For a 15-year-old kid to try the same thing was far too dangerous. He looked towards the dungeon entrance. With an extremely grave expression, all they could do now was pray for the boy and hope nothing terrible happened. Inside the boss zombie's stomach, Endless lay sprawled out. Soaked in stomach acid, the disgusting liquid corroded his flesh, but his mind paid no attention to the pain. Images kept flashing through his head. He saw the moment he saw Lin Din again. The instant she opened the door, the way she looked at him, and the memory of standing with her in a room. Everything replayed over and over in his mind. In that moment, Endless had a sudden, clear realization. He couldn't fall here. He couldn't fall now. Just then, a new system notification appeared. Class Change Quest. Clicking Confirm will immediately transport you to the Class Change Dungeon. Upon entry, the challenger's entire status will be completely refreshed to ensure the best possible class determination. Two options appeared: confirm or cancel. Without a moment's hesitation, Endless hit confirm. Inside the dungeon where the Divine Core team had abandoned him, Endless suddenly realized he had been teleported back here. The scene was exactly as it was before. He was now sitting at the top of a long flight of stone stairs. 2 towering pillars stood on either side, and in the middle was a large stone cross mounted on a long concrete table. Endless was leaning against the table, his body looking utterly exhausted. Everything that had just happened in the B-rank dungeon, Sai had drained the last of his strength. The fight with the elite zombies, the infection, and the moment the boss monster swallowed him whole. A notification appeared before his eyes. The system announced that the challenger's condition has been fully restored. All injuries and adverse effects have been removed. As soon as the challenger is ready, you may press the start button to begin the test. Endless stared silently at the message. Then memories of the last battle flooded his mind. He remembered the moment the she-zombie parried his attack, the moment the bandaged zombie suddenly appeared behind him, and the sharp pain as its teeth sank into his arm. He let out a slow breath. The class change quest was a very special type of quest, and it normally couldn't be activated just anywhere or at any time. The system had to transport the challenger to a special test area. Because the system had restored his condition, even his severed arm had grown back. He slowly raised his hand and looked at it. His arm looked completely normal again. He knew he had just narrowly escaped death. After resting for a moment, Endless slowly stood up. A thought crossed his mind. After completing this class change quest, there was a high probability he'd be thrown right back into the B-rank dungeon. The system usually resumes the previous event after special quests are completed. That meant one thing: he absolutely had to make the most of this opportunity. And he needed to obtain a class that was perfectly suited for him. The only class that could help him unleash 100% of his true power. Endless looked back at the notification screen while stroking his restored arm. After a brief pause, he reached out and pressed the start button. Immediately, the system announced that there would be multiple rounds of tests, and the weapon used in each round would be completely different. Killing a soldier-level enemy would award 2 points, getting hit would subtract 1 point, and hitting a critical weak spot would grant an additional bonus point. If the challenger dies during the test, the current weapon type will be permanently disabled. As soon as the system finished its instructions, a few knight-like enemies suddenly appeared before him, rising from the ground as if the floor itself had given birth to them. The system then announced the start of the first round. Current weapon dagger. A dagger suddenly materialized in Xiao Wujin's hand, and at the same time, the system adjusted his stats. His speed increased significantly. Meanwhile, his penetration power and evasion were also improved. These adjustments were designed to suit the characteristics of a dagger user. Without wasting another second, the moment the enemies began to move, he lunged forward. In the blink of an eye, he had slipped behind one of the knights. He wrapped an arm around the enemy's neck and plunged the dagger deep into his throat. A notification popped up stating fatal assassination. Instant kill, plus 3 points. 3 other enemies charged madly toward him. Xiao Wujin leaped back to dodge the attack. As soon as he landed, he was moving again, the dagger in his hand flashing continuously. A stab to the neck, a lightning-fast strike tearing open a throat, and the third enemy fell immediately after. The movements were incredibly fast, decisive, and precise. For a moment, it seemed as if Xiao Wujin had entered a true killing frenzy. Before long, the first round had ended. Another notification appeared. The second test round will begin now. Weapon type, Great Blade. A heavy Great Blade appeared right in front of him. Xiao Wujin immediately gripped it. Once again, the system adjusted his stats. This time, his strength attack range and burst power increased dramatically after the stat distribution was optimized. His physical strength felt immensely greater than before. Xiao Wujin suddenly realized that if he'd had even half this strength back in the B-rank dungeon, the battle with the zombies wouldn't have been nearly as difficult. Just then, something strange happened. The group of enemy knights in front of him suddenly began to merge. Their bodies twisted and collapsed into one another. They combined into a single giant knight-shaped enemy. Xiao Wujin observed carefully. Clearly, the system was testing how different weapons dealt with various types of enemies. When facing large monsters, an instant kill isn't always the best tactic. The key is to neutralize their ability to move. The giant knight attacked first. Xiao Wujin quickly dodged to the side. The moment the attack missed, he immediately rushed forward, his body sliding between the giant knight's legs. He swung the great blade low to the ground in a powerful slash, severing the enemy's ankle. The giant knight lost its balance instantly, but Xiao Wujin didn't stop. He grabbed onto the enemy's arm and climbed upward, turning its enormous body into a ladder. He ran along its arm, heading straight for its neck. When he reached the back of its nape, he activated the Great Blade's exclusive skill, Lion's Roar Slash. A brilliant golden aura erupted from the blade, the energy condensing into the form of a roaring golden lion. The great blade came crashing down, the attack slicing clean through the giant knight's neck. Its head flew off and slammed onto the ground. The massive corpse quickly collapsed right after. But the test didn't stop as another group of enemies immediately appeared. The next test round was set up with the weapon-type light sword. Xiao Wujin grasped the light sword, and with a single sweep, he unleashed a powerful slash that cut through countless enemies at once. They collapsed in an instant. Another notification appeared. Next round, weapon-type hammer. This time, Xiao Wujin lifted a heavy warhammer and brought it crashing down on an enemy's head. The force of the impact crushed the enemy instantly. The rounds continued in a flash. Next weapon, katana, Xiao Wujin lunged forward and cut down several enemies with a single fluid strike. Next weapon, spear. And this time, a dragon-shaped enemy appeared. Xiao Wujin launched the spear forward with perfect timing, the weapon piercing straight through the dragon's chest from a distance. Round after round passed continuously. With each weapon, Xiao Wujin earned more and more points. Finally, the system announced that all weapon tests were complete. Now the system will analyze which weapon type the challenger is most proficient with. Xiao Wujin exhaled sharply. The entire process had completely drained him. Even so, he believed his overall performance was quite excellent, and now he just had to wait for the results. Beads of sweat slowly rolled down his face as he waited for the screen to finish analyzing the data. Then the first result appeared. Dagger score 98 points. Classification mastery level. Xiao Wujin nodded slightly. After all, the dagger wasn't a bad result, as it had advantages in speed and assassination. But before he could think further, another notification appeared. System error detected. The system announced that the challenger's score with the Great Blade was also 98 points. Xiao Wujin blinked in astonishment. More notifications suddenly appeared in succession. The system has detected that the challenger has passed all weapon training trials. Xiao Wujin frowned as this result only made things more complicated. Even if he was proficient with every type of weapon, he could still only choose one class. He stared at the notification, unsure of how the system would decide. Then a new message appeared. Because the challenger's performance in all data categories has reached an excellent level, the system will make a special exception. The challenger will receive a class, a special exclusive one. The name of the class appeared on the screen, Weapon Master. This class allows the challenger to possess multiple classes at once, master multiple weapon types, and freely switch between them inside a dungeon. On the screen appeared the image of a hooded figure holding several cards in their hand. Xiao Wujin was truly surprised. He had never heard of this class before, not even in his past life. It seemed the system had created a completely exclusive class, just for him. Xiao Wujin stared at it carefully. This means, no matter what kind of monster or dungeon he encounters, he can easily switch classes to gain the upper hand. The system continued to explain a novice weapon master is initially limited to 2 classes. To increase the number of classes, the challenger must eliminate other challengers. Doing so will allow him to directly inherit their classes. Xiao Wujin raised an eyebrow when he saw that rule. Then a smirk slowly spread across his face. That condition was perfectly suited for him. But the surprises didn't stop there. Before teleporting back to the B-rank dungeon, the challenger will be allowed to temporarily experience the full power of this exclusive class. For a short period, the challenger will enter a weapon master state with all weapons and functions unlocked. Then another small message appeared. Your current revenge progress is 3.8%. Meanwhile, outside the enemy's stomach, everything felt strangely silent. The air was suffocating, just like the calm before a storm. Anyone perceptive knew that this kind of silence was never a good omen. The bandaged zombie began to feel uneasy. It didn't understand why the zombie army hadn't revived yet, especially when the challenger should have already been dead. Something wasn't right, and it was making the creature restless. It kept glancing around as if afraid something would suddenly break, and then all of a sudden, the big boss's stomach right at the giant scar began to glow. The light grew brighter and brighter, pulsing steadily as if something inside was waking up. This was completely abnormal, and it looked like something was about to burst out at any moment. The entire situation was incredibly tense, like a bomb waiting to explode. The 2 elite zombies immediately noticed the strange light. Along with the low, rumbling sound coming from the boss's stomach, they went on high alert, instantly their bodies tensing, ready to react. They had no idea what was happening, but they knew it was nothing good whatever was inside there. It definitely shouldn't have survived. Meanwhile, at Ling Ding's apartment, she sat quietly on the sofa holding the box that Endless had given her. She stared at it without blinking. Deep down, she had an inkling of what was inside. Even though Endless was the one who delivered it, she knew the real giver was Han Shuo. She hesitated for a moment. Her chest tightened at the thought. A part of her didn't want to open it, afraid of the meaning behind it, but the other part couldn't resist. It seemed that no matter what, she had to know the truth. When she finally gathered enough courage to open the box, her eyes widened in shock the moment she saw what was inside. Memories immediately came flooding back, pulling her into the past, taking her back to the day Han Shuo first gave her this gem in this very room. That day, she had asked him why he was giving her such a thing. Han Shuo just smiled and said she was always worried he would die in a dungeon. He explained that this gem was linked to his life, and whenever she felt anxious, she could open it to check. He told her that if the gem was still glowing, it meant he was still alive and safe. That no matter where he was, as long as that light was shining, he hadn't perished. But Ling Ding had pushed it back to him, telling him she didn't want to accept it, because she knew herself too well. If she kept it, she would open it and check it all the time, and that would only make her more anxious. In the end, Han Shuo had no choice but to put it away. Back in the present, Ling Ding picked up the gem with trembling hands, her emotions surging violently. As tears began to stream down her cheeks, the gem was glowing. That could only mean one thing. Somewhere out there, Han Shuo was still alive. Back in the B-rank dungeon, everything had exploded into chaos. Endless suddenly burst out of the enemy's stomach, launching himself out with incredible speed and power. The impact was so strong, it tore open the boss's abdomen, sending flesh, blood, and energy flying everywhere. The scene was brutal, gory, and completely unexpected. If the boss could feel pain, it must have been the worst stomachache of its life. The three enemies were completely stunned. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. This guy had clearly been poisoned and swallowed, yet here he was standing tall, alive and kicking, as if nothing had happened. As soon as Endless landed, the two elite zombies immediately took a defensive stance, their bodies tensed and ready for battle. In contrast, Endless looked incredibly calm, almost to the point of being nonchalant. He casually mocked their horrified expressions, seeming to enjoy their reactions. And to be honest, who wouldn't be shocked? Anyone in their position would have been certain he was dead, but he had returned as if it were nothing, completely unscathed and ready for round two. Endless then adjusted his stance and slung the greatsword over his shoulder. His energy changed. It was clear he was getting serious. The real game was just beginning. His power was now focused entirely on maximum speed. The female zombie looked visibly irritated, wondering how this kid suddenly got a greatsword. And how was he able to switch weapons so easily? It was all so absurd, and that just made her even more furious. Endless noticed their confusion and just laughed, even though he couldn't understand a single word they were saying. He guessed they were doubting their own eyes, so he decided to give them a real show. He switched between weapons smoothly. It was clear he had completely mastered every type of weapon. With a confident smirk, he even taunted them, saying this wasn't even the best part. He was burning with fighting spirit and thoroughly enjoying this battle. He switched to the dagger assassin class and dashed forward without a moment's delay. In the blink of an eye, he had circled around behind the female zombie. A notification suddenly appeared. Tip: approach the target's weak spot. The attack will deal up to 300% armor-piercing damage. Endless didn't hesitate. He slashed at her, aiming for a critical point, but just as the blade was about to connect, the bandaged zombie lunged in to block the blow. In return, both of its hands were severed, but the horrifying thing was those hands immediately began to regenerate. Endless didn't even bother to blink. The moment the hands grew back, he cut them off again, over and over. "Let's see which is faster," Endless said. "Your regeneration or my slashes." He attacked relentlessly, his movements becoming faster and more ferocious, one slash after another. He didn't give the bandaged zombie a single second to recover. The fight turned into a brutal exchange, super regeneration versus pure speed. In the end, the bandaged zombie couldn't keep up. Infinity had entered a true berserker rage. It was a bloodbath, with slashes tearing through the air faster than the blink of an eye. The female zombie stood frozen in horror. As she watched her comrades get diced into 100 pieces, Infinity activated his demonic dagger dance skill before she could even react. His eyes blazed and his speed exploded. He charged at her again, unleashing a relentless barrage of attacks from every angle. His blades moved like a storm, forcing her to constantly parry, but she knew she couldn't hold on like this forever. Thinking fast, she decided to create some distance. Since daggers have a short range, backing away would give her a better chance of survival. She launched herself into the air. She tried to escape and reposition herself closer to the creature, but Infinity had already read her move. The moment she widened the gap, he instantly switched weapons. This time he switched to his marksman bow. Maximizing both attack power and accuracy, he drew the bowstring and took aim without a shred of hesitation. Then, with a cold release, he fired. The arrow tore through the air at an unbelievable speed and pierced straight through her chest from behind. She collapsed to the ground, her body spent, still struggling to comprehend what the hell had just happened. Her eyes filled with confusion and fear. She still couldn't fathom how he could just switch weapons at will like that. Infinity switched weapons one final time, transforming into the Grim Reaper, his execution power at its peak. Gripping a terrifying massive scythe, he slowly walked towards her. Every heavy step carried the weight of a final verdict. And for the female zombie, this was the end.